本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？全然見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? It is June 4th, 2021. Probably. We're not 100% sure if this is going to go up then.
Have I been approved for E3? Have I got my registration?
I don't think I have, or it came in while my
you already been approved?
No, I'm saying I don't know if it came in or not. What if it came in and my email's down? There's a short window overnight where my email or anything that would have come in would have gotten rejected. What if I got rejected?
So you didn't attach a traffic report.
Oh my God! Wait, you have to? No, do you? Did they ask?
No,
for
it was like one of like the three. Can't wait to repeat some of these jokes on a different podcast that'll go up earlier. You could attach a traffic report to like a business card, like a masthead. Then there was paste links to your articles, but that
URL
link was broken.
Was too long.
I did Bitleys for everything.
I did too, and it was still you clicked like editorial, presumably.
Yeah, I think so. Yes,
I clicked podcaster because that's really all I do at this point, right? And I was like, I'm curious, what do they want from a podcaster? And the two things that they wanted from a podcaster were like, you need to attach one of the following two things: a link to your podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, etc.
Okay.
It has to be under 50 characters, which is too long. or like there is no podcast link in the world that's under 50 characters at this
That's
point.
just not how the internet works.
So I also made a tiny URL and put it in there, and that was under 50 characters, but it didn't register. It was like, well, you still need the other thing. You still need part one, which is a letter from an editor at the publication saying that you need to.
You gotta do what Gene Park did when he had to attach a business card and just attached a jokey Photoshop of like, this is a business
the thing
card.
is, I have my old business cards. So I thought about doing one of those and just crossing out editor-in-chief and writing podcast host on it.
I wouldn't even gone that far. You could have just attached it and been like, okay.
I know. Well, so
what are you going to do? Reject me? That's
business card was not one of the options for me. My option again was a letter on masthead from my boss. And so I wrote a letter from Rob Zachney. I sent it to Rob Zachney. I was like, are you good with this? And he was like, yeah. And I just sent it to them. So, fraud. I fraudulently have gotten into E3. I haven't gotten in yet. So
when I was a teenager, going one time for my senior year, the E3, whatever that year was, my friends flew out with my dad because my dad would always go with me to go to E3 until I was in college. And so a couple of my friends came with. Obviously, none of these people are in the industry. How are they going to get into this show? Well, I'm just going to edit the HTML on a couple of reviews to add their names, and then me, site manager of Gaming Age, is just going to write a letter of endorsement saying that they are freelance contributors that are writing for Gaming Age and should be allowed into the show.
You edited your own pieces, presumably.
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh my God.
Possibly. Probably. I would give myself that much credit to do it, but those flew through.
Of course.
Redacted friends of Patrick from high school got
E3
we snuck into the Sony party at Dodger Stadium.
Wow.
It's good.
If you like, before we get to today's episode, which is a Resident Evil Village Spoilercast exclusive, I was gonna say, if you like nostalgic conversations about things
I should have saved that. Like, if you want more stories like that, maybe there'll be another E3
what I was gonna say is you might enjoy Waypoint After Dark. Waypoint After Dark. Was it like the dark sound?
I don't know. I needed a noise, and I that's all that came out.
Okay. Waypoint After Dark is one of the many things in the rotation, I guess I would say, of Waypoint Plus, a new service that we have launched after years of being asked to do a subscription service. We managed to make it happen. Thank you to everyone involved who made that happen. And you can go to, I believe it's vice.com/Waypoint Plus.
Yeah, that's what I'll say. So we're just going to go ahead and
I can do this myself. Waypoint.zone/subscribe.
Okay, because
I own
you can alter
Waypoint.zone.
it. Yeah,
I can make that Waypoint.zone youtube.com/subscribe. And that'll get you right there. You can go look at what all the features of Waypoint Plus are there. It is we've said this before. You've probably heard this already if you've listened to recent podcasts. Though maybe you haven't. Maybe you're here just for the Resident Evil Spoilercast. We're trying it out. We finally got the opportunity to try out the subscription thing. We're going to give it a shot. We're going to kind of build it as it goes. We have wanted this ability for a long time. Now we got it. Things like this Spoilercast, except what if it wasn't about new releases and it was about like interesting old games? A little thing called Waypoint 101.
Let's replay Resident Evil 6.
I'm curious.
No, I'm not 35 hours.
Curious,
yeah, you are not that curious.
What I really want is like a Chip and Ironicus style deep dive let's play of that game where like someone is super knowledgeable about the Resident Evil series and also the development of that game. Like I want to
interview somebody about Resident Evil. Like that's what you most likely get is one of us interviewing somebody who's like very knowledgeable about Resident Evil and talk to them about like the legacy of RE6 and how that fits.
What happened to RE6 and then how did you recover from that and decide to go in this direction, blah, blah, blah. I want that. That would be great. Or again, the VH1 pop-up video style, like annotated gameplay would be great. Anyway, we are here to talk about Resident Evil Village. I guess it's not Resident Evil 8, but I always wrote RE8.
Well, I actually think they've done a decent job of like tipping their hat at the absurdity of the length of the series in how they talk about it, while also being like, hey, it would be alienating to a lot of people, the number 8. Unless you've just like fully embraced the absurdity like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest.
Which is funny given how the story of this game eventually goes, where it is making
it's actually an origin story which I was not prepared for.
No. And we'll talk about that. I guess we should just what I'll say right now is we're going to do a real short segment up top because we've done past conversations about just what we think of the game generally on the podcast. We've gone pretty deep multiple times at this point. And what we really want to do is get to your questions because we got a billion questions. I couldn't get them all in because there's just so many. We might not even get through all of the ones I like pulled out. I tried to find ones where, hey, multiple people sent something in like this. So if your question didn't get answered, apologies, but we just got so many in. We're gonna let those guide the conversation a little bit. But let's start first and foremost with just like, what did you think of the arc of this game? High level, where did you leave it, Patrick?
I don't know where it goes from here, I guess. That's one of the questions. We'll get to someone.
All right. But just your feeling about this game.
I think they have found a really interesting middle ground on like the arc of this franchise as a whole. Like what it represents, what is the difficulty of making horror games, which is that you start with restraint, you start with surprise, and then video games, horror in general, like is very sequel focused, right? Like you have these iconic images that are then sort of like driven into the ground, and it's where mythology takes over. This happens in any long-running horror franchise. Like Resident Evil is not unique to this. You know, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, like, you know, the Halloween, you know, you have, even like the Halloween franchise right now, the rebooted like trilogy that is happening with David Gordon Green is a splinter off of Halloween 1, in which the rest of those movies don't exist, but the original is canon. And so there's such a rich history in horror of playing with mythology and tone and genre, because you have these iconic images, and like, what do you do with people when it doesn't scare them anymore? And I think they were very successful in Resident Evil 7 at taking this basic idea and they said, what if we tried to redo Resident Evil from scratch? Like the original game. Like if we were trying to really just hone in on that feeling and made that game knowing what people like in 2021. Right, I think they were like very successful at doing that while still falling into some of the traps that are inevitable over the course of a 12 to 15 hour game, which is that the action takes over, you have too much ammunition, you've seen the enemies too many times, like the crescendo of the plot, and the inevitability of like bringing in the mythology. In some ways, I respect that they refuse to just like cut bait and do like Resident Evil Legends, and they just keep pushing forward with the mythology. And I thought they didn't quite strike. Like, I think the scariest stuff in RE7 was as good as I've ever seen in a horror game in, 10, 15 years. And was disappointed initially that RE8 has less of that. That said, I think RE8 does a pretty fantastic job, all told, although it like tilts a little heavy in like the back third once you enter like Heisenberg's factory, of finding a way to include little bits of everything that Resident Evil has become
all the way through it. Yeah,
all the way through it. You know, I think the castle sequence is scary intense, despite the fact that like Lady D doesn't really work as a chase character. Yeah. I think the horror PT type sequence is brilliant, an all-time great Resident Evil moment. And I like that at a certain point it gets absurd, but like, I don't know, it didn't bother me in the way that it sometimes can with these games. It felt natural. It felt like maybe it's because the game doesn't stick around too long. It's not a particularly long game. Right. That said, a conversation you and I privately had was like, I probably would have played a game that was twice as long that just had chill sections of me exploring
more side quests,
spaces.
Totally.
So yeah, all told, I really
liked it. Yeah, I'm very much lined up with you, and I think my opinions will come out as we answer questions. Obviously, there's some things I have reservations about, or that I think just didn't work, but lots of it that just like completely scratched the brain. I think I rank it lower than the RE2 remake in terms of brain scratchiness.
Yeah.
But it's a more interesting game in a lot of ways. I'm gonna do, let's say, not the Just King Things trademarked 5-sentence summary.
Okay.
Which I don't want to just lift that, but I'm gonna just, for people who maybe are just listening to the spoiler cast, because that happens.
Sure.
And want to know what happens in this game, let me give like the very brief breakdown.
Okay. 5 sentences?
They do every King story or every King novel in 5 sentences.
And you're gonna do that here.
I'm not going to do it in 5 sentences. That's what I'm saying.
Right. I was just going to say, like, I feel like Heisenberg could be 5 sentences.
I mean, maybe. I
depends on the level of detail. If you just, okay, anyway, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. After, fuck. It's out of my mind. I'm like, well, 5 sentences. I could do it in 5 sentences.
Yeah,
I probably can.
Suddenly I just turned it into a dare.
You did, into a dare, exactly. After a traumatizing event in Louisiana where they came across a family that had been this is even missing important.
The Baker
Ethan
family.
and Mia Winters are a married couple with an infant baby named Rose.
Yep.
And a really rough history of mold zombies being wrapped up in bioterror plots. And who've escaped that past thanks to the arrival of one Chris Redfield, who is an anti-zombie, anti-terror soldier, and have relocated to somewhere in Europe. Mia, the family is attacked at the beginning of the game. Mia is killed. The baby is stolen. Mia's killed by Chris Redfield. The baby and Ethan are taken capture, and are being driven somewhere. And then they are attacked. And Ethan wakes up alone and cold in the snow outside of a small village, that itself is outside of a large castle. Ethan begins the process of trying to figure out what's going on, try to find his baby, and along the way meets four lords of the area, Lady Dimitrescu, a very large vampire-like lady who has been doing experiments in order to produce daughters for herself. What the fuck is what's Beneviento's first name?
Oh, I don't know. That you've got
whatever.
It.
The one I just said.
House Beneviento is
House Beneviento. I forget what her fucking name is. It's annoying that
she's not really a character in the game, which is why
that's the problem. Exactly. Lady Beneviento, who has a doll, who named Angie. Angie's name I have here. Who hides her face. Moreau, who is sort of a small fish-like man who is humiliated by the rest of the kind of children of this family. He's not actually a child, but that's his vibe. And Heisenberg, a sort of mad scientist meets Nicolas Cage meets Nazi scientist.
Sure,
vibe.
definitely.
I was playing this game with friends of the table's Janine Hawkins watching, and she kept being like, he's just doing Nick Cage. He's just doing a Nick Cage impression. And you're right. You're 100% right. In order to find his baby, Ethan goes through each of the places tied to each of the... Oh, also all of them tie up to Mother Miranda, a mysterious figure who has 6 black wings, who seems to have created them, given them their powers, and in the process also transformed many of the people in the village into lichens or vampire mosquito bug people or other weird creations. I guess Heisenberg has also created a bunch of robot cyborg zombies.
His experiments are a little off to the side.
Yeah, off to the side, he's building an army. Ethan goes through all of these locations in order to first find information about what's going on, and then he learns to find all of the pieces of his baby Rose, which has been split up and given to each of the different lords, one each, ahead of a ceremony in which they will be put back together and will be used as a
vessel.
Catalyst. Huh?
Well, I guess Rose will actually was supposed to be is a vessel for Miranda.
Is a vessel, right. A vessel is the right word.
Child.
For Ava, who is Mother Miranda's child, who died 100 years ago to Spanish flu during that epidemic. And we learned that is what Miranda has been motivated by this whole time, is trying to get back her lost child. Along the way, we also learned that Mother Miranda is tied to the history of Umbrella, that the umbrella from the Umbrella logo comes from this village.
It's like vaguely just like, yeah, remember that umbrella thing we found in a cave? Like I brought that back.
I brought that back. In my mind, that conversation was very much like they were flirting. I read that whole thing as like very romantic.
Oh yeah, they
got together.
Oh
they were fucking.
Yep. Down by those roots.
Absolutely.
We found this mold and we found each other.
And we found each other, exactly. God.
The whole idea is, she needs a way to, she doesn't know what to do with all this special stuff, and Spencer's can weaponize it.
Exactly. Finally, Ethan gets torn up all the way through this.
Oh, yeah.
Until finally, in a confrontation with Mother Miranda, has his heart ripped out, at which point we switch perspectives to Chris Redfield, who you've bumped into a few times throughout this game. He and his soldiers have been running an operation here. You've been finding their computers and shit all over the
He's a real dick. Doesn't seem like he's actually accomplished very much in the course of this game.
Yeah, at all. But then you become him, get a ton of ammunition, a laser designator for a gunship, and fight hordes of enemies and then some bosses. And at some point in here, you learn the truth. Not only was Mia, who in the last game was revealed to have been compromised by this special, terrible zombie mold, mushroom person, but also Ethan died in Resident Evil 7.
Like early.
Or like immediately. Like, I don't even know if we played that part of the game. We must have.
Is extremely funny, and almost I don't know that I would go as far as to say it's a meta commentary on like the horror genre, like writ large, which is that if this was to happen, you'd be done very early on. And in RE7, like that's what happens. He just dies.
Correct. And then was recreated by the mold.
Well, I guess he was one with the mold, recreated himself. So he is Ethan.
It's like the end of Super Mario Brothers the movie where King Koopa gets all molded.
Yes.
He gets part of the fungus. But then what if King Koopa had controlled the fungus through sheer force of will?
Well, because I believe it is revealed throughout the game that the part of like the mold and these roots and like whatever is like a larger consciousness, and the consciousness gets absorbed, which is what motivates Miranda in the first place to try and resurrect her child. So in some ways, like Ethan's just coming back, baby. Like do not count Ethan out.
Right. No, I 100% think Ethan is going to come back. Why does Ethan?
I'm pretty sure Ethan was walking along that road.
Did you see?
They pulled the model, and it's Ethan's model.
Yeah, they pulled the model,
which could be.
When the game first launched, you could just go into photo mode. Maybe you can still do this. I have not tried myself. But you could just go into photo mode during that final secret, the post-credits stinger cutscene, and just move the camera up to that hill, and it's just Ethan. That's the way you can look at Ethan. It's very funny. Though, like, who knows? Maybe they just wanted a model that you could see at a distance wasn't Chris Redfield, but was adult man.
Yeah.
So who knows? But
I don't know.
Anyway. He awakes without a heart, except for the heart he needs, the heart of a father, the heart of a husband. By the way, Mia's fine. Mia didn't get actually killed. That was Mother Miranda being shot, because it's also revealed she can take the form of anyone she chooses.
Yeah,
and if she'd done that.
I believe Screen Rant's got an article that dives deep into Mother Miranda's wine purchases. If you actually take a look around Ethan and Mia's home, there is a whole lot of wine being stocked in this place.
So do we now think that was a Mother Miranda choice? Mother Miranda got Mia's credit card and was like,
yeah, it was,
I will rack up.
She's here, so, she's ready to relax.
Just kick it. You go and you fight Mother Miranda. You learn that Mia's alive. Chris saves Mia. Ethan confronts Mother Miranda, consumed by angst about the fact that he's a mold man. After he defeats Mother Miranda and is all fucked up, he sends Chris forward with Rose to escape with his baby and his wife, and stays behind to eradicate the giant mold fetus monster, which, by the way, we never do anything with. No. There's just like a big mold monster that looks like a fetus.
Yep. And the iconography is all over the game.
Yes.
Like suggesting that it's very
key,
important.
We don't even get a key or whatever. Yeah.
We don't even get like a little like sheet of paper that's like, hey, so what's going on with this thing?
Why does this tree mold look like a baby? Nothing. Zero. Again, the keys in the game, the most important key in the game that opens up each consecutive place looks like this baby. Nothing. And you stay behind, or Ethan stays behind, to detonate an N2 mine, like from Ava. I'm sure N2 is a real type of explosive that's not just an Ava thing, but every time that Chris was like, I gotta plant this N2 explosive, I just thought about the huge NERV explosions from Ava, because that's what they used in that. And then he blows up the big thing, and Chris gets away. I guess it's a nitrogen explosion. I guess that would make sense, like N2. Anyway, Chris gets away. Post-credit stinger, 15 years later.
Is it?
Is it not 15 years?
Am I guessing? We do not get a...
I thought it was.
I do not think they give an actual...
Do you think that she just got old? What if it's like 3 years later and she's
got powers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe she just aged up real quick.
And also she's like very close. Like... okay, I don't know what it would be like to like lose a parent that young. Like, I don't know, but like she like very close with Ethan, like very emotionally bonded, and like you were a baby.
You were a baby.
So it just made
me remember everything.
There has been speculation that part of her powers, and like when she has the line that's like, well, do you want me to that complete trash dick of a dude?
That guy
like,
sucks.
That guy really sucks. Her like security detail. Imagine that she's got powers that Chris isn't even aware of. My guess is, because the whole game is alluding she is more powerful than anything, right? And we never see what that means.
Not once.
So I think it's possible that it's not actually 15 years later, but it's actually a lot sooner. But maybe it is. But that would be quite a leap in time for the chronology.
For some reason, why did I think that it said
it has a line, but it says like the father's story is over.
It does have that. It does say that. You're not wrong.
The goofiest shit, and like it just sits there until you like hit X, and prompt past it.
Yeah. You're not wrong. I am gonna double check it because I'm a jerk.
No, you can check it, but I want to say that when I was reading
you're right.
An epilogue analysis, that was like one of the bits was like, it's kind of interesting they don't mention.
People don't know. Yeah.
Which gives them wiggle room, I guess, on whatever they want to do.
Totally. So then, that's Resident Evil Village. We skipped over a bunch of stuff. There's 4 boss fights. There's 4 There's a zone that is like PT-ish. There's a zone that is you're kind of doing some platforming and puzzles like environmental puzzle solving to create bridges and escape a big fish monster. There's 2 sections in a row that are a lot of shooting. If I have one knock against the pacing of this game, it's that you get both the stronghold, which is like the Wolfman.
Yep.
Like haven, like the center of the Lycans, and then immediately after that you get the Heisenberg.
And like I think the weakness of the stronghold section in particular is this game flirts with the notion of prep work and traps and environmental manipulation as a way of dealing with mobs. You know, like there's like a handful of times where it's like, you can move this shelf. Like it's one of the first things you do in the game in the village is like, hey, maybe you want to move these shelves to like block enemies from coming in. And it's never really a thing that you mess with. Maybe you do on like harder difficulties to like to deal with mobs. But like those are sequences where if this game was more about like, I don't know, like if those sequences had me doing more work in the environment to like set traps, and I had options that weren't just realizing that if I just found a convenient corner and just sat there and watched, if I could rope the lichens so that they were jumping between these posts, and I would just wait for them to land and shoot them, and then just drop pistol.
Them. Yeah. I mean, like that had to happen in the sense of like there should have been a big werewolf sequence somewhere in that game, because they're the first enemies that you come across in the village, and like a big showdown with them makes sense. Yeah. However, it just wasn't particularly appealing, especially then followed up with the Heisenberg place, where like there are unique enemies. That's where the cyborg zombies are, and they almost all of them, I think, except for the very lowest level ones, have like a little red engine on their heart that you have to shoot. And
even the low level ones they prevent the headshots from like immediately downing them, because you have to take off that
that's
with
what
a pistol, and then you can follow it up with a shotgun. Blast.
Right.
And that is not, I didn't like love that area, but I did enjoy the fact that the enemy design required something differently. I mean, like I enjoyed like the Terminator characters, following me, and then I'm patiently waiting for the electricity to boot back up so I can try and shoot them with my pistol. Like that, I enjoyed at that point the game mixing up, because like there's actually a pretty low enemy count, or enemy variety in this game, which is fine. But then it gets to a certain point where it was once scary to meet the like low level vampire experiments that carried the axes. Like those were really fun to fight in like the underground areas in the castle. And then at a certain point, it's like, all right, like
4 pistol shots.
I don't need them to like fall off of a mountain, like the rubble for the 9th time. It's just like me wasting 7 bullets.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we should just get into questions at this point, I feel like, because we have so many, and again, I feel like they're going to guide our conversation pretty well.
Also, I should note, just because I bring it up here, and I'm not sure if it'll come up in the questions, I haven't watched, like, they put out, like, a small, not documentary, but behind the scenes about, like, the QA and, like, design team, like, about a year before the game was finished, where the QA, team came back and was like, yo, there's like way too many enemies in this game. Nobody's gonna like the combat here is not good enough to justify all these enemies. And they like had to like really,
way too many, meaning way too many per area, basically.
Like
not
too many to deal with, like not enough ammo, and also the enemies were frequently just like swarming in front of you. And one of the big changes they made, which I think was for the better, was like it was actually really enjoyable to like approach an area, kind of get the sense that lichens were hiding, and like pull out your sniper scope and like try and pluck a couple of them off. And I guess that stuff didn't really exist until, all told fairly late in the process as a way of addressing the way the QA team felt about like the flow of the game and how much sheer combat they were.
That's also a great indication of, or a great illustration of how the roles of QA can be more than just bug fixing, which I think also, or bug identifying. That's one of the things, I mean, that's also important, obviously.
Sure.
But that sort of qualitative feedback being allowed to help shape the game is great, because I think that balance is really good. One of my favorite things about this game is that enemies don't respawn just always generically, but if you leave an area narratively and then come back to it, it's often the case that new things will have changed. Either signs will go up guiding you to the next place, taunting you, or lichens will show up in the area, those vampire things will show up. There will be something that has shifted. At least once there's like a big boss type character who just like shows up in the graveyard in the village. You're like, what the fuck
the
is
giant
going
werewolves,
on?
right?
The big werewolves. Which is good. And then it's also the other one. It's going back to get the Beneviento treasure, where you go back past that graveyard. That's the one I'm thinking of. And one of the big dudes with the hammer, I want to say,
that's the only sub boss I didn't
Oh,
I
you
mean,
missed that
I encountered the giant werewolf that you plunked.
Oh, no, not that one. I'm not talking about the other one.
No, I know, but I'm saying there were two sub bosses that I like. That one I encountered and then just decided to just walk around,
and I killed it.
And you killed it. And are there multiple ones, or are you always just encountering the same one?
There's multiple.
Okay,
because it also shows up. That one also shows up at the ball labyrinth for the Benviento location.
Right. Yes.
Which I've forgotten about that second time it shows up.
Yeah, and then I picked up the slab that you would take back to the Benvenuto graveyard to trigger that boss, and just I looked up what it was for, and it was like, I'm all right. I'll just keep going.
All right, let's get into these questions. I'm going to read this first one from Joe from Dallas, who says, I have a few questions all focused around a single subject. 1, why did Mother Miranda need to split Rose up into 4 crystallized pieces and spread her out to the 4 others? Couldn't she have just kept them for herself? 2, who built a mechanism for placing 4 pieces to get the giant's chalice? Besides activate the elevator and the bridge to go to Heisenberg's workshop, what does the chalice do? I've played through this game a few times, and I'm still not sure about these answers. Anyway, love the pod. Keep up the good work, Joe from Dallas.
I really think the Resident Evil franchise is best not thought of in those terms. Why is Ethan the self-regenerating human incapable of like climbing over these fences that require increasingly elaborate keys? How did Heisenberg build this fucking factory?
I have no idea.
Did he do it brick by brick with his own hands? Like, he can't manipulate objects, so I guess in theory he could have like slowly built this thing.
Why would Heisenberg? Okay, Heisenberg, by the way, is also Magneto. We left that part out.
Yep.
He's just Magneto. He just controls metal, like, with his mind.
And doesn't do anything cool with that in his boss battle. He just turns into a grotesque transformer.
It's like a Tetsuo the Iron Man, like metal blended with flesh. Like, and it's fun, you know. I guess he makes big saw hands and like tries to hide himself with shields and shit. But also, why does he make a tank explicitly out of a metal plastic blend so that he can't fuck with it because it has plastic in there?
That's a good point.
Why did he build what? It's like if Superman invented kryptonite
and he just left it out.
And just left it out for Chris to find, and then for Chris to give to Ethan Winters. And Chris is like, keep a low profile. Anyway, here, check out this tank. Keep a low profile, by the way.
Just go up this elevator with this tank. Yeah. See what happens.
See what happens.
I consider like all that stuff. I think is just that is part of the Aria aesthetic is increasingly elaborate devices that serve mostly for aesthetic as opposed to anything else.
Yeah. I don't know why Rosemary, like, this is again, I was playing this game with Janine, and Janine was very much like increasingly frustrated at this game's ability to have incredible premises that it's just deeply uninterested in.
Yep.
Where it's just like, and that's also true for all of the lords, I feel like. Like, Beneviento clearly has something going on. Like, that you find a journal entry that's like, okay, she was a young girl, her face gets scarred, she feels like very self-conscious, people make fun of her, she gets adopted by Mother Miranda, who then does experiments on her, but we like never talk to her. We never even get anything.
Lady D is the only one that
and Heisenberg a little bit, but not
Heisenberg a little bit. But and I think that's
his
where
stuff is more about what he wants now,
not who he is and how he got there.
Exactly.
And that's where I think you get a little bit of that with Lady D, which is, even though I could have I wish she had been more of a presence in the game in entirety. At least I think part of the reason she'll have standing as like a villain in like, once we're past this game and people think back on RE8 is because she not only is just like an iconic like visual like design, but it is also like she's present in the game, and like these other people are not. Like they are merely totems for you to like get to accomplish a task. They do not have any sort of agency or like characterization. This game actually is even like very light on documents to come across, which is usually the Resident Evil crutch of, all right, we're going to put in all the character development into this 7-page document. And there's really not a ton of that either.
There's not enough of that. I mean, like even Moreau, who like you get a vibe from, which is put upon, made fun of for the way he looks, unhappy with his mutation. Again, for people who haven't played this game, the way this thing worked is that, I mean, it's kind of weird. It's multiple things. At this point, what do we got? We got virus zombies from, not in this game, I don't think, But that's Umbrella classic T-Virus
The
type
T-Virus,
shit,
yeah.
right? We got mold zombies, which we first fought in RE7.
No, I guess part of RE7 is like unchecked mold, whereas like T-Virus is like mold adjacent, right? Like
it's mold
weaponized
adjacent. Are they
mold?
even? I don't know that they even overlap, because in that one letter from the Umbrella dude in this game, he's like, I looked into that mold stuff, but you know what I found out? Viruses in the future, baby.
Right.
I don't know if it's a virus. I don't know if it's an overlap or what. 3, we have Cadeau Creatures, which are, there's these big gross bug looking things. I think they're bug looking things. Are they bugs? The Cadeau, or are they fetuses also? I don't remember. They're also in a glass bottle. I want to say they're big bugs.
They do, yeah. They look,
but they kind of look like fetuses also.
Yeah, they every time I saw them, I felt like, oh, this is leading up to like something very important that also was the giant pulsing fetus that also turned out to just be, you know.
And those are like focused mold, it looks like.
Yeah.
Those are mold parasites. Okay, apparently they are a blend of a parasitic nematode and the mold.
Oh,
so I'm going to put those as like sub-mold zombies.
Sure.
And then we got robot zombies.
Yep.
Also, we just got cyborg zombies. Just here is a metal heart.
But also, aren't those just an offshoot? Because I believe they call the like husk characters like in the castle, they're like like kind of like, you know, just kind of like lumbering around that have axes and swords. Those are vampires still. And so are they not?
No, I don't think so.
What are they specifically
They have
called?
all been given the Cadeau.
Okay.
And the Cadeau has a chance of doing weird. Okay, like that's the kind of, I think, if I'm getting this right. So Mother Miranda puts the Cadeau into people to see what happens. Most of them become
like
lichens,
yeah.
Like the just wild facial hair, strong muscles. You never see any lady lichens. There is a gender divide on what the characters become, which is weird, and no one ever references it. But like then one of them becomes Lady D. Lady D puts the mold in her maids, and most of those turn into the vampires in the cellar or the flying vampires. And that just seems to be like a genetic variable. Who knows? Some of them get wings and become weird mosquito-nosed flying gargoyle things, and other ones become the scythe or the sickle-holding cellar vampires.
You didn't play the demo, right? The first demo, the one that's
didn't.
It might be worth going. It's because it's only like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
it's not content from the main game, although it's featured in the castle. It's actually there's made reference to it in in Village about like the maids that would, you know, eventually just get like locked in the basement and fucked with, and like you play one of those like maids that, you know, worked in the castle, you know, presumably came from the village, and then realizes they are well and truly screwed. Right.
The witches, which are the vampires, are explicitly the Cadeau, but then they are the Cadeau laid eggs. And then from those eggs, there are blowflies. Then the mold blowflies ate the human bodies and brought them into themselves, which in some ways foreshadows Ethan Winters.
Ethan, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's fun. God. But yeah, I guess you're right. It does say here, going back to the thing, Heisenberg's robot zombies are just the Morace is what I'm going to say, which are
just modified. It seems like the overflow from the castle goes to Heisenberg's factory.
Heisenberg, which is weird because I feel like Lady D and Heisenberg hate each other. I don't know how they came to that trade agreement. I don't know what she got out of the deal.
Well, maybe she's getting more bodies. Like maybe Heisenberg's getting the bodies, getting them and he's like, look, most of these aren't going to work out. Like that, you know, in the beginning of the game, like you get dropped through the top of the castle all the way to the bottom, and maybe those bodies are just down, you know, just down there. And Heisenberg comes, collects them, and, you know, does his dark deeds.
His dark deeds.
Resident Evil Dark Deed.
Resident
upcoming
Evil Dark
spin-off.
Deed. So yeah, that's. I think that's our answer. Is this is all of that stuff is if they could have done more with. all of the lords, all of the explanation. Like we get a question later on about how we feel about how magic this game is until it becomes super science. Like it leans all the way into there are vampires, there are werewolves, there are magical like rituals that you can do. There's a magical knife you get at one point, very briefly.
Yeah.
And you stab Lady D with it, and she turns into her monster form.
Which I guess could just be science, because I mean that's
there's probably something in that knife, right? That like resonates and makes her lose control of her transformation.
Sure.
I guess.
I mean, again, like this is the same series where like people walk around as regular ass humans, and then they turn into like a giant head splits out of their skull with like tentacles. It's like, are you able to reform? I guess so. I guess you can. Well, at least Miranda can. I don't know if that is true for like once Heisenberg makes the choice to go big, can he shrink back down?
Right. I don't know. I know that Dimitrescu can because it talks about her that being a thing that's happened before. Right. Is that that's her? She can lose control. This is why she's
kind of a werewolf. Blood. She's like a werewolf vampire. And
she has to drink human blood and eat flesh to keep that under control. Which is interesting.
And I just wish like part of one of my criticisms of the game is that it feels like they had a bunch like the design, the art team came back with a bunch of cool fucking concepts, and they just looked at this and went, this is awesome. These are, I mean, I don't know that there's been a Resident Evil game that I can think of that has had this many interesting like villain designs all in a single story. Like there are just so many cool ideas being played within the space, and it feels like then like a bunch of teams split off kind of did that, and then like at the very end they're like, all right, how threaded together, and like if you believe Resident Evil insiders like Dust Golem, like that's essentially what happened. It was like this game's, they call in Japan they often call stories scenarios. That's always been historically what like the Resident Evil franchise is called, like their story premises. And he's been very consistent in knowing quite a lot about this series, and said that like this game, like the scenario for the game was like a year before it came out, where they found like, okay, here's all the stitching for how this is going to work. It doesn't mean there aren't like existing elements and voice acting, like,
of course,
but like I think some of that helps explain the
patchwork nature.
There. Right. It makes me a little bit bummed that I didn't like the DLC in RE7, but boy, would I love if there was a season pass for RE8 that was like, hey, all right, we're gonna do little kind of like the demo
historical
for
vignettes.
RE8, which was like, here's a little side story with some background information, and the kind of like fleshes out the characters of this without the reliance on Ethan fucking Winters and like the drama of his family and the weight of the mythology of like Resident Evil. I'd love little bit like hour-long vignettes into all of those characters that like actually turned like the dollhouse into, like, I was fine with it just being like a weird,
it's a fun
haunted
area.
house, but it does seem like that character had a lot of potential had they chosen to realize any of it.
I'll follow up on that knife. The knife had been forged with a bunch of, or over time had been imbued with natural poisons from across East and West so that it could be used to kill monsters and demons, which was important for the villagers because they lived near that big fungus root. So they were coming across the occasional mutant monster. And so they needed a knife.
Can't move away. I understand sometimes circumstances are circumstances.
Your family lives near the big root. I mean, and also it wasn't,
where are you from?
It wasn't, where are you from?
Big root. Big root that occasionally, how it took Uncle Jack? You know how Uncle Jack got a little weird for that summer? We had to use the poison knife with East and West. Put him down.
It's very funny. But yeah, that's it. Anyway, we should keep moving. I think there's just not going to be answers, or someone's going to write it in and be like, well, actually, the reason that you needed to split up Rosemary was to blah blah blah.
Well, also Resident Evil will retcon this at some point and make sense of it, which is also the delight of any horror franchise is all right. So how like what part do we
How
like?
do you
That's
make
why
sense of this?
Ethan can come back. They could just say,
Right,
"Oh,
right.
science figured out you could pluck his consciousness out and put it in to a body that this time has a face." Ethan has a face in Resident Evil 9.
So funny. He'll have to, because you'll have to see him. That's the funniest thing about it, is the scene in which Mia sees her father. Let's say the next game is you're playing you're Rosemary. If you're playing as Rose and he's like, Dad, it's gonna be a face we've never seen before.
Right.
That we were supposed to respond. Like, you know what I mean? It's
and in theory, she's never seen it before either, because it's just in her, twinkle of her mind's eye photos.
God, very funny. All right, we're gonna keep moving. Matthew writes in. Can you read this one here for Matthew, or do you want to?
Hold on. Oh, yeah.
You've logged out of the questions. I see now.
No. I got Matthew. Ethan Winters categorization. Is Ethan Winters the ultimate video game wife guy? Whew.
He's up there.
He's up there. Because Ethan himself does not have a lot going on.
Yeah, name 3 interesting facts about Ethan that aren't that time he had his hand cut off and put it back on and put some healing juice on it to make it reattach, and then he kind of just shrugs. He's like, "Yeah, okay." Which
was like, I don't think he's a wife guy in RE7, because part of the appeal of RE7 was, oh look, like these two people dragged into like what Resident Evil is now is just like fucked up shit happen, like just could just happen to you.
Could happen to you.
But then when RE8 chooses to like bring him along and be like, no, he's important, and the trailers are all going to be like Ethan Winters. Yeah. I was convinced for a long time this was all a dream. Like, I did not think this story was actually happening, and that part of the explanation for the lack of a face, the fact that all the characters just kept saying Ethan Winters, like, who gives a shit about Ethan Winters, was going to be revealed that, whether through mold or something, that he was just going to wake up at the end and, like, still be in the house, and, like, his kid was going to be there, and this was all, like, hey man, you had like one fucked up summer in Louisiana, and then what?
Trauma,
you just like found vampires and a tree root that talks, and no, actually that all happened to poor
Ethan Winters.
Is it poor Ethan? I don't know, man. You probably could have walked away. Let Chris handle this. He's done all right.
Let Chris handle it. Chris had that. Yeah, Chris would have been. It would have been. I guess you probably don't get the baby back. Maybe you do.
I mean, it definitely. I mean, Chris, by the end is experiencing some regret. He seems like he doesn't feel great about having purposely set up the family to bait Miranda out.
Yeah, I saw people saying that Chris Redfield got great characterization in this game. Finally, that's how I felt.
He gets more characterization than Ethan Winters does.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like, at least by the end,
he's like upset about stuff, and also gets to like role play being a Call of Duty character.
Yeah, but also, I mean, like, even with Ethan, like, he spends time with Mia, but like, what do they like about each other? Like, what makes this, like, their relationship is entirely defined by a trauma in which they were separated the entire time. So
that's not true. They weren't separated the whole time. Sometimes she was stabbing him 30 times.
Well, that's true. And that would be...
and he was blowing her up.
That would be a problem that you would want to work through. Even if it had to be over, like, Zoom calls,
Do you think that's why Mia at the beginning was so, like, don't talk to me about that? Was because it was actually Miranda. And Miranda's like, I don't know what happened then. Don't talk to me about that. You'll see right through my shit.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Because, yeah, it's not a possession thing, right? So she's not, like, possessing Mia. She just is. Yeah, maybe she's just like, I don't...
She's just like an Agent 47 type vibe. It's just Mother Miranda in a wig, actually.
That's such a much funnier explanation for her avoiding the subject. Is like, I don't know. She's like on Google trying to, like, hack into...
the Baker incident.
And there's like some YouTube, like, why was there not any viral, YouTube videos about, like, hey, I've been to this house. Totally. Look at my hand. I found the mold.
Honey, I saw your YouTube history. I know you don't want to talk about the Baker incident, but why are you watching all these conspiracy theory videos about what we did? Honey,
you were there.
The scrapbook again. And she's like trying to be subtle about it. She's like pointing at like the dad, Mr. Baker. She's like, what was his name again? And he's just like, you don't remember his name?
conveniently explains, as many people pointed out, the unsafe conditions that this child
the baby.
is in.
Yeah.
Because that stuff changes very fast. Like the changes that there were things that we did with our oldest, who will be 5 at the end of August, that we aren't supposed to do with our youngest, who is 1. I can't remember the specifics because it's a lot of it's like when they're really, really young, but like that stuff is always changing. So naturally, it would then make sense that like having the bumpers would make. She's been doing this for what, like 40 years, like a long time.
She lost her maybe 100 years ago.
Not even sure there were bumpers 100, but like I could see how like
well, like, there was probably a sequence 50 years ago. We'll get this.
She's
in the
probably
DLC.
had some babies that the vessels didn't all work out.
Yeah, so I adopted it, didn't really,
Yeah, so all of a sudden, things that seemed nonsensical in that intro are suddenly falling into place because Miranda just didn't know what the fuck was going on, what to do.
Dr. Spock. Ethan's like, honey, we don't read that. That's old text at this point. We kind of new stuff going on here. Very good.
But yes, ultimate wife guy. I agree.
Ultimate wife guy.
I endorse.
And also a dad. I mean, this game is more of a dad, right? He's more of a video game dad because he was like, "Where's my baby?"
But it's also
back Rose.
That's also just. I mean, but like, there aren't like enough sequences like showing affection, being a father. It's just like he's. In some ways, it reveals, I don't know if it's the shallowness of Ethan or the shallowness of the characterization of Ethan, but like, there's nothing to hang this character on. It's just like he is wholly defined by, I am a father. Not like, I'm a dad. Like that's what he just identifies as that, not necessarily like what that actually means to be that. But of course, it's because they have to gun down, Mia/Miranda in the most violent fucking fashion possible in the first 10 minutes of that game.
It's wild. Yeah, it's very weird.
Which I guess now makes sense, but I still felt that incident dragged on a little longer than it needed to.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. 100%. A little much. All right. Adam writes in, says, common criticism / joke about Resident Evil games that they start strong and tense, and then inevitably end with you superpowered and hurling rockets at a giant monster. I'm curious if the vignette-like structure of RE8 with you moving into different spaces with fundamentally different modes of play helps disrupt that trope. Was the game ultimately better off for being a collection of different experiences, even if they don't feel totally cohesive? I think so. I think it helps. So I will say again, the Stronghold followed by the Factory, like back to back, I think is a lot of that back to back, and maybe the game would have been better if you'd let me do the Stronghold in between the Dollhouse and Moreau's section.
Yeah, if you'd gone from, hey, we've taken your guns away to, all right, you know what we want to do?
Go
you want to
wild.
shoot them guns.
Yes, exactly. I think that's probably a pacing that would have fit my desires a little bit more. What I will say worked for me is the Chris Redfield turret sequence where you're just a walking turret filled with bullets that you can shoot 1,000 lichens with and grenades that do a ton of damage, and that was awesome. Like, I'm down. Like, it's very stupid, and everyone's just doing
spamming R2, and
everyone sounded like, when like a Ubisoft does like the Division or a Ghost Recon demo at E3, and everyone's like pretending to play the game as character. You know what I mean? Where they're like, "All right, Alpha Red, go loud," and it's just like that shit over and over again. It's like if you asked me to write by the end of the day a bunch of military, dialogue, like a bunch of it, where I had to just start writing now. I didn't have any research time. I was like, all right, just remember shit that happened in video games and TV shows and anime. I'd be like, all right, here we go. Oscar Mike, etc.
Well, there's a lot.
So funny.
There's also a lot of anime in Resident Evil, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
RE6 is sort of like the apex of like the like anime storytelling. And especially if you like sort of disregard like a lot of the movies and things they've done where like that is explicitly like CG anime and like and things like that. And I will say, like, one of my favorite bits related to that is when I think Miranda says at some point, when she realizes that Chris is like kind of coming for her, is like, or is it Heisenberg? Someone says like that, like that boulder breaking asshole or something like that, which is a reference to like Chris Redfield like punching a boulder, I believe in RE5, and like breaking it with his fists in a quick time sequence.
It's very good.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think it actually sidesteps some of the issues that the series runs into traditionally with that ramp up.
there's always that tough thing in Resident Evil, the final act of Resident Evil game, which is like, all right, I know they want me to be shooting more. I still want to hold on to my ammo.
Yeah.
I still want to be, and so that Chris switch over, where you're like, I don't have my inventory. Ethan seems to be dead. And even though he's mold and he'll come back, I'm sure of it. I may as well just go wild. Like once you get to that first supply drop, and you're like, all right. I mean, you start that section with 300 bullets for your rifle, and so that first like few fights, you're like, I'm gonna use my pistol instead. I'm gonna be careful with this
get
rifle.
That headshot.
Get those headshots, and you get to a supply crate that has like the green smoke coming off of it, and you get another 300 bullets. Like, all right, I guess it's go time, baby.
And actually, that sequence is fun, but also it like undercut by like the existence of like the stronghold, and like that would have felt even better if the game had like pulled back on that stuff even just a little bit.
Just a little bit. You're coming out of a huge action section to go into a
right, like the last
section.
4 hours of the game prior to the like the 90 minutes of epilogue as the story like sort of finishes, like is just shooting. And it's fine. You know, I don't even have that problem with it. I think the shooting like feels like surprisingly decent in the game.
I didn't love my final guns. My favorite guns in the game were the middle guns I had. The second shotgun and the second pistol. Yeah. And then when I got I
didn't upgrade to the last pistol, like the automatic, because I figured I was going to spend so much money getting it that I'd rather just stick with like the highest powered version of the middle pistol that I had.
The thing is, the lowest level of that third pistol, the damage
is stronger than the highest on the second. But see, I just wanted to save at that point I wanted to save my money for the upgrading the other. It was like the shotgun was like my my main heavy. It's like, all right, so I'm just going to keep dumping. So I bought like the ultimate shotgun and then just dumped as much as I could. And also I was using the sniper rifle.
The sniper rifle is the best gun in this game. The sniper rifle is like
and the game also realizes it. Like you can tell when a game is trying to communicate to you, like you should be using this weapon maybe in situations that don't call, because there are actually precious few sequences in the game that call for, in theory, a sniper rifle, where you are like hitting things from like there are like 5 or 6 sequences where you're like shooting lichen like far off before you've sort of like triggered them running at you, and you can kind of like mow them down. But it's mostly
like hard enemies where I can put something between me and them, and they have to run a ring around me, and I'm like sniper rifle,
set up the precision shot. Yeah. And so there was like some of the most tense holding a gun sequences I had was in Heisenberg's factory, where you would get like these robotic zombie sort of like Terminator creatures that had like really erratic animations that were happening,
blocking their weak point with their hand, right?
And so you're like holding this sniper like shot, which you kind of have to do on zoom in.
Yeah.
And then in some ways you're like, well, I wish I could take off this attachment that made it zoom in farther. I would actually prefer it was closer, because then all of a sudden you're just like wobbling this aim as you're waiting for them to move their arm. And I loved those bits, especially when you fucked it up. Like it felt
when they're
so
charging
good
at you. There's like a little window, and you're like, if I miss this, I'm going to get literally a drill in my chest.
But
don't worry, I've eaten a lot of really good meals, so it's not going to hurt me all that much. You know the bit in the Heisenberg sequence where you're in the like elevator that goes up to the big fan, or not the elevator, the stairs, and at some point the 2 giant dudes with 2 drill hands, I want to say, and all the armor come down. I got like dead ended. I was like at a dead end with both of them coming at me. I was like, all right, here we fucking go. I need to get hit in the right way that will slowly pivot me past them so I can get some distance.
I think that's one of the only, because they had jetpacks in that sequence, which was kind of a neat, that's one of the only ones where I had to like, I just like let myself die, and I was like, okay, like this is in a game where I died a whole bunch of times. So we're like, it did a really good, I know a lot of people recommended playing on the harder difficulty mode, but I actually found normal I don't play horror games for the challenge. Like I play it for the tension. And so then the problem there, as the literal tension between the player and the game designer, is I want to butt up against death without actually dying. And what I found frequently in Village is that that happened. Like there were multiple times where you get health flashes in the UI that tell you like, hey buddy, like you need to either craft a health thing, or you need to like end this fight because one more hit is going to take you out. Yeah. And so I probably died, I don't know, 5 or 6 times at most, but I came up to that edge like, a dozen, 20 times.
Totally,
And it made sequences really thrilling where it would not have been fun to die and optimize that fight. It was more fun to have my back against the wall, barely scrape my way out. And I just found like the way they managed ammo resources, health, death.
There's a lot of quick or auto saves in that game.
Yes,
and the few times I did die, I was like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna go back to the center of the village. I have to walk. Oh wait, no, it quick saved when I came in this room."
And they do a really good job of that. Like I found all of that allowed the game to maintain a sense of tension that can be frequently very difficult. It's where the whole take guns out of horror game movement comes from. It's like how do you maintain that when players have so much agency over a situation? And I thought Village did like a really spectacular job of still like eliciting tension without relying on death as the punishment for a mistake.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna. Sorry, some biomutant discourse is popping off in the world. I saw
that.
I'm just not gonna be distracted.
I'm letting other people do it.
Now, you know what? Here's the thing: is we don't need to talk about this now because by the time this episode is out, we will already have talked about biomutant.
That's true
on a podcast, so I don't need to relitigate. Can you read this next one from Scott?
Yes, Scott says, if you were the villain antagonist in the next Resident Evil game, what would your character model look like? What would you sound like? Your gimmick? I think it would take the first act for you to learn. I'm the villain. I'd just be a normal dude at first, but I'd be revealed to be a horrible terror of blood, teeth, and bloody horror. I spend the rest of the game shapeshifting into helpful NPCs, so you would never know for certain if your safe area or friendly shopkeep was actually all that safe or friendly. They flirt with that idea in this game that you only sort of like know in retrospect, but that's fun. Like that would be
if there was one instance of the Duke that was actually Miranda,
right?
I mean, that's one of my other beefs.
If just you were walking around and Lady D just appeared again.
Oh,
like that
sick.
would.
Oh, they way underused it. I hadn't thought about that.
Like, can you imagine if you were just like walking through the village and all of a sudden you just look and she's just right searching for it? You'd be like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be incredible.
And actually, that character would have worked better in the village. Like that area, like she needed more space to move around, so that the limited move set that she had could.
She was never a threat.
Room to breathe, but like if in a more open area where they could have been, like the village is able to, like that sequence is able to echo a bit of the police station, in which you have a large area where you can feel relatively safe. Like frequently, and they try to use the werewolf to accomplish that, but I was just never scared of the like that giant thing. It was just a big, but like, man, if she had shown up or the witches had shown up, like that would have been a really fun play on that. But
and also it's just like a pain to move around some of that space before you get the right keys,
right?
Where you're like, all right, how do I get around this tractor? How the fuck do I? Okay, what do I do here? And so there'd be really circuitous routes, and you'd be like, okay, how do I get away? There's that ladder. I can climb that ladder up to the roof and then jump down. You're
going to Heisenberg's factory. You open the door and she's just there walking at you. Like, that
would have been sick. Fuck. That would have been sick. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also you're then doing the thing of like, I killed her. Why is she back?
Right.
And the reveal,
I dropped that knife.
Right, I dropped that knife. Where'd that knife go? Can I get in a boat and go get that knife?
All right, we didn't answer the question.
You get the boat, you get the knife, you cut her, and then she turns into Miranda because it reveals, it undoes the that would be great. Yeah. Anyway, what would you be? What type of monster would you be? Or villain? We don't have enough mages. Like, I want to be, you know how in Castlevania, one of the types of character, like Shaft in Castlevania, who's just like a mage. Mm-hmm. It's just like an evil, like, sits in a library and then resurrects the I want to be some sort of like alchemist, right? Because that's the way you get close to science, who is resurrecting past. I'm going to jump off this conversation we just had. I'm going to jump off of past. I'm going to resurrect past bosses so that like Mr. X comes back, Tyrant comes back. Some Code Veronica people come. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna taunt Chris Redfield with all the monsters he thought were already dead. By resurrecting them.
Resident Evil has
I have lightning powers in this world.
Resident Evil has a long history of like innocuous enemies that aren't actually a threat, but that you have to fight anyway. Like Plant 42, which is like, yep, look at this giant plant
Yes,
that
that's
otherwise
great.
is just by itself, just biding its time, and then just like finally, like Plant 42 will have its day. I want to be one of those. I don't know
That's
like,
good.
which one I'm gonna be, but it's like there's like the shark in RE2 that otherwise is just a shark minding its business. You've got the alligator, like just like these mutated. Like
The giant
otherwise,
snake in RE1. Like, there are just big animals sometimes, huh?
Yeah, but I want to, but like, I think the animal is like a little more aggressive and fun. I'm like, I want to be more on like the Plant 42.
The tree,
like, Yeah, I'm
right,
I'm just like one tree, like an infected tree outside of the castle that you can't really get to, but I'm shaking really aggressively.
I'm really
and all I can do is I can drop these poison apples and I can try and mutate you.
And you gotta exactly. Yes, exactly. Good. There are certain apples that don't fall and are like a different color, and those are your weak points.
Yeah,
those
like I don't have control over this one branch. Like it didn't get infected. And it's like the good apples drop from there, and the villagers know.
Who do you
this.
think wins in a fight? The Resident Evil bosses or the Metal Gear Solid bosses? Because that's a very similar. Like, when I think about PlayStation 1 games, two games that I don't hear a lot of people talking about those two games in concert with each other very much, but there was something about the way.
But their villain design are both horror camp.
Yes.
That's a good question.
And again, I think both of them are drawing off of a history of like villain of the week or like that sort of thing, both in West and like again a big anime thing, right? Of just like, here is the episode with the weird tree monster. Here is the episode with the super sniper.
I feel like the power levels of the Metal Gear characters are lower because they are ultimately dealing with like a grounded.
Only in Metal Gear Solid 1. Metal Gear Solid 2 has like Fortune.
Does have a vampire.
And has literally has vamp.
Yeah.
And then
we might have to like, can we get who's people are always running those like modded wrestling matches?
Yeah.
Can we
gotta
just
get
someone get all the Resident Evil and the Metal Gear characters and let's run a bracket.
See who wins those fights? Yeah, we gotta let's keep this in our back pocket.
Cadeau, don't cut it.
No,
we're just
don't cut it.
We're just telling you that like we should do
future.
like whenever every website does like a social media bracket, like this is gonna be ours. It's not like best game ever. How can we get people arguing? It's Metal Gear versus
RE bosses. Maybe we get some other. We'll have to think about it. There's another series that maybe has similar boss designs that should get in there. Like, I don't think it's Zelda, but like there's something else that has to have that same campy, fun, distinctive super.
I don't think
bosses.
Silent Hill has enough of them.
No. And I don't want it to devolve into best bosses either, because I think that's a different thing. I want specifically these ones, and I don't want which one's best. I want which ones win in a fight.
Plant 42 versus Hind D. Let's go.
Right. Who wins? Exactly.
Plant 42's got a shot, I think.
It's a tree. I don't know. What if the helicopter gets caught up in the branches?
Right. See? These are the kind of discussions.
Waypoint.zone/subscribe. All right. This next pair of questions comes in.
That's how we would do it. We would put it out on socials, but our conversations about that would happen in a podcast.
It would have to happen in a podcast. Yeah, absolutely.
Content.
We would have our bracket and then the public bracket. You know what I mean? We would come to a decision. This is good. This is good content. All right. Grayson writes in, after beating Resident Evil 8, I was very excited to see where the series goes. However, I'm skeptical that we will end up in the same space as Resident Evil 6. My question is this. Does Resident Evil need to stick to its lore at this point, or could it be used as a framework to tell more experimental horror stories like the VHS series of horror movies? Also, how are you? Did you have a nice lunch? Drink water. Grayson. We're pre-lunch right now, Grayson, but thank you. And then a similar question here. Hi, y'all. Love the show. I enjoyed my time with RE8 a lot, but the epilogue ended up bringing out the cynic in me. The suggestion of a future story with an older Rose using weird mold monster powers is so cool, but I can't help but feel that they're never going to properly follow up on it. I immediately pictured RE9 as one where you play as Chris Redfield, and Rose maybe shows up to do something cool during one of the boss fights early on before disappearing from the rest of the game, or even worse, ends up evil or crazy, and you have to kill her. It just feels like the kind of setup that I've seen promised so many times in video games and other media, and nearly always gets let down. Maybe I'm still just bitter about getting into Kingdom Hearts a couple of years ago and seeing how Kairi gets done dirty over and over again. Am I being too pessimistic? Do you think there's any chance they'll actually make the kind of game the epilogue seems to be promising? I think both of these are united by the sort of like fear that RE6 is on its way again. That at the end of this game, it's very easy to imagine that like hyper militarized, like big action sequences and a move away from this quiet stuff. Because this game loves its lore by the end of this game, and it's just like not.
Well, Resident Evil
about.
Loves its lore, right? So
I think
like the notion
and
that
many RE fans love the lore. We should also just note that there are. I do know lots of people who were like, marked out at the fact that the Umbrella dude knew. Well,
it's the convoluted nature as part of the appeal. It has ceased being fascinating storytelling and is now just like interesting in its convoluted like that has become its own like source of delight in weirdness. And at this point, I think they should just keep pushing. The code name going around for Resident Evil 9, like I guess RE7, 8, 9 have been conceived as sort of like a first person trilogy of like how they're going to approach this. And like the code name for 9, I don't know if this is from Dust Golem or this is from like the leaks, not leaks, that it was hacked, it was stolen from Capcom's internal data. That RE9 is called Apocalypse, which would certainly lean in to the fears that folks have here. If I try to be optimistic, the notion that you are like fighting against an apocalypse occurring as opposed to the apocalypse has occurred and now monsters are everywhere, which at the same time would also be a convenient way for them to like close the book on Resident Evil mythology and start over if they wanted to. Yeah. But man, I love the idea of Rose being like an investigator, like going around doing like essentially what the first questioner like envisioned of like an sort of anthology sort of thing.
That'd be so sick.
I
Rose,
would love
but like condemned, but you're playing as Rose.
Well, yeah, give me Monster of the Week wrapped up in a larger mythology that's playing
X-Files,
out.
But you're Rose.
Like send Rose out. She's got some weird powers that mixes up. Like, look, I'm fine if she's like, I don't need guns. Like I got other shit I can do.
I'm telekinetic.
Right,
I mean,
and like
that's just part of why it's nice that they didn't show any of her powers. Right, is they have nothing holding them back
slate.
Now.
Could be anything.
She could shoot energy beams. Like, who the fuck knows? Like we just don't know what she could do, and that means that this next game, if she is playable, she could be Bioshock. Do you know what I mean? She, Bioshock, the hero of Bioshock.
Yeah. Mr. Bioshock.
Mr. Bioshock. I don't
like she could, you could see like she has X-ray vision. Like there, I think there are things they could do, which is like getting away from unlocking series of guns.
His name was Jack. I forgot. Sorry.
But like unlocking a series of like alternate power sets over the course of a game. I think that could be, theoretically interesting. And I'm also, just intrigued to see them continue down like what is Resident Evil in first person, and the fact that it's happening alongside a big ambitious RE4 remake. There's another third person.
This did make me really want that remake, is what I'll say. Is that like... Also, by the way, did I already say this? We skipped a type of zombie. Resident Evil 4 parasite zombie. Another type of zombie from the war. Las Plagas, the plague, I think.
That happening alongside the RE4 remake, and then also there's a game coming out next year that got what was a part of that hack, which is essentially Resident Evil Revelations 3, but it's called something else because I don't know that like Resident Evil Revelations 2 is a game that came out on 3DS and so those games are underrated though. The second one in particular has some cool ideas. I'm choosing to be hopeful because this team has proven to be pretty smart, and if they manage to, the fact if that PT sequence didn't exist in 8, I think I'd be a little more worried that they like weren't just ready to completely ditch the like varying tone, but that makes me excited that maybe they can keep doing that. It's so distinct from
everything else, down to the big final doll fight where you're like playing hide and seek.
Yeah, you still don't pull out a gun. You're just finding a doll on the ground and hitting X. It's like, okay,
and like stabbing it with some scissors. It's wild.
Didn't explain like why does that kill it? Like what? Like that?
Yep, I don't know. Can you read this next one from Murph?
Yes. Murph. There are 4 sections of the titular village. There are 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Which turtle embodies each section? Okay.
There's one very clear one off the bat, which is Donatello.
Right.
Who's Heisenberg.
Right.
Donatello does machines.
Yep.
Heisenberg does machines. That's
Yep.
easy. It gets hard after that, I think. I want to say Lady D is Leonardo.
She strikes me as a leader.
As
Seems
a
like
leader, right?
She definitely is kind of, but she also pushes people around. Like, but I guess all these are kind of aggro, so we have to take away sort of the fact that they're villains from the character archetypes of the turtles. So I'm just gonna
just for maybe people who don't know about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm just gonna read this one section of the song. I'm not gonna read the whole thing.
Yes,
but can't stop these radical dudes. The secret of the ooze made the chosen few emerge from the shadows to make their moves. The good guys win and the bad guys lose. This is, wait a second. This feels wrong to me. 1 second. Because here, I got the right one.
Is that from a different
song?
One? Okay.
Yeah. Let's listen. Now I'm gonna go through. Listen. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Heroes in a Half Shell, Turtle Power. They're the world's most fearsome fighting team. We're really hip. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they're heroes in the half shell, and they're green. Hey, get a grip. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when the evil Shredder attacks, these turtle boys don't cut him no slack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Splinter taught them to be ninja teens. He's a radical rat. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Leonardo leads. Donatello does machines. That's a fact, Jack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Raphael is cool but rude. Give me a break. Michelangelo is a party dude. Party! Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a Half Shell. Turtle Power.
Yep.
So, Leonardo leads. Donatello does machines. Raphael is cool but rude. Michelangelo is a party dude. Now I'm thinking I'm wrong about Lady D, though, because is she kind of the partier of the... is Heisenberg the partier? Because he's so...
He's probably got a club in that warehouse somewhere.
And I feel like his vibe is very...
I could see him letting loose in a club. Like, the beat's about to drop, and Heisenberg...
and he's like...
He takes that jacket off. Turns out he has, he's just ripped. Like, the hottest dude possible, despite his grungy demeanor. So are we saying,
do you know that meme of the dude at the dance? It's European. It's Dimitri Finds Out is the name of the meme. I'm just gonna post the GIF here for you. You're gonna know what I think immediately. It's like at a European dance club, and a lady's interviewing a dude. I want to say it's.
Yes.
Okay. It's not as,
yes.
You know this. And she tells him something, and then he starts dancing.
So you're saying this is Heisenberg? I think Heisenberg's got slicker moves than that.
I don't know.
No. You think maybe in his head he thinks he's got slicker moves?
I think it's charming that he doesn't have slicker moves.
Okay.
Just, you know what? I'm going to skip ahead in the middle of this question to get a sub question in here, which is. Tom wrote in and said, plenty of people already discussed Lady Dimitrescu's lack of screen time, but there's something else I feel like I haven't seen mentioned much. I feel like Capcom thought Heisenberg was going to be a big deal. He gets a big special introduction at the beginning. He is by far the most screen time of the four lords. Yeah. His own personal motivations laid out. Yet my feelings on him are that he's fine, I guess. It reminded me of Far Cry 3, who hyped up a final villain even worse than Voss, but that guy kind of sucked. Heisenberg isn't as bad. He's just not as interesting. So my question is twofold. Do you agree with my assessment that Capcom thought Heisenberg was going to be a big deal? And two, do you feel as lukewarm on him as I did? Curious to hear your thoughts, Tom from New Jersey. I think you're in the different corners of the internet than me, Tom. I know lots of people who are vibing on Heisenberg.
Yes.
A lot of people think he's extremely hot, despite maybe being a Nazi scientist.
Well, we all have our faults.
I mean, listen,
who among us have been experimented on by the Las Plagas prototype
or whatever, right?
But I agree with him in the sense that
yes,
by important, setting aside how the fandom reacts or how the culture reacts, I do think you can see that like that was always meant to be that section of the game. Like this was meant to lead into the end. Like this was all part of that. And
one of the earliest things feels like there will be one of the lords who does not like the Mother Miranda, and that will be the big climactic thing. That's how it feels anyway, for sure.
So we haven't settled our
so that's Heisenberg. So now we got Ninja Turtles.
So I think maybe Donatello does machines, right? Is Moreau doing the machine? I mean, he does like manipulate like the goo. So, but
everybody manipulates. They all kind of do machines. It's just they're different types of machines. Moreau has the goo and the fish stuff. The dolls are machines, in a way.
Yeah,
that she brings to life. But she's bringing them to life via drugs. They're not actually alive. She makes you hallucinate via drugs. So maybe she's the party dude.
Right. Well, she slipped you like, hey, you know,
she slipped
we're out here. We're in the middle of.
Hey, when you see Mia there, that's just drugs. That's not Miranda, right?
Where?
In the dollhouse. You see Mia briefly there.
Oh, yeah.
That's just hallucination.
I assume she's still stuck in that prison.
Yeah. Okay. I'm saying that's not Miranda pretending to be Mia.
No,
right?
I think that's just a hallucination. So
Donna,
I think you're right.
Donna Beneviento is her name.
Okay,
that's all.
But I think she's Raphael. I think she's the
because you think she's rude.
I mean, having that that suck face baby thing chase me was pretty rude.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking rude.
I'm trying to.
She's Raphael.
Well, also, I feel like she told me these drugs were going to be cool. She knows I don't do this very often, and I just wanted to have a good time. I'm a parent that wants to like relax and instead
every once in a while.
I have this fucking. I'm having a bad trip, and so she didn't regulate. She didn't give me the right stuff, and so I think that can happen with a partier where like they think that you're ready for this.
Okay,
and
so
you're not.
she's our Michael. So she's our.
Raphael.
Wait, so she's our Michelangelo. Then.
Oh, Michelangelo. Yes,
Michelangelo partier. Yes. Raphael rude but cool. I'm gonna give Moreau rude, but
is Lady D rude but cool?
Maybe Lady D is rude but cool.
Little rude,
very cool.
You know, getting all these maids from the village, you know, sucking their blood. Doesn't treat the daughters very well. Doesn't seem to actually care about them very much.
Right. Are we saying that Mother Miranda is Master Splinter?
Yes.
Okay.
Because she's given all the powers to them. So she's essentially the toxic ooze. She's
put them in the ooze and is raising
Doesn't seem like she's done a whole lot of teaching or training.
No. Seems like, in fact, that's the problem with a lot of their relationships with each other and her.
Not enough communication.
Again, this is a game very much about parenthood and what good parenthood looks like. What good parenthood looks like is rescuing your daughter when she's been split into 4 vials spread across a haunted village. What bad parenthood looks like is being so consumed by your desire for your one biological baby who died 100 years ago that you fail to give the love and affection to your 4 adopted monster babies who you also created, in many ways gave birth to in that sense, and yet don't show them the affection that they deserve. Especially Moreau, who just gets bullied, which is a shame.
Well, that's also why Moreau could fall in the rude but cool category, because Moreau is rude, but it's like, of course he's rude. Like, he's been, you know. And actually, like, your fish body is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, dude.
I understand.
Be this big fish body.
You're sort of limited. It's kind of like having the shitty X-Men power. Like, it only works in a big body of water. you know? Very convenient that there's this lake here for you to splash around with a dam.
Accept your body. Accept that you're a cool fish dude. You know, we gotta. There are so many normative beauty standards, and Moreau has really felt the boot of those on him in a real way.
I think Village has gotten people to have a conversation about this.
Right. Finally, fish people rise up. I mean, we joke, but also this game does still have one of the worst fat phobic characters, and obviously Moreau himself is built on centuries of stereotypes around little people, and it's fucked. Anyway. Rude but cool Moreau. Oh, here we go. Rude but cool Moreau.
Yep.
Let's just stick to it. Heisenberg is Donatello. He does machines.
Mm-hmm.
Lady D. Lady D party dude. Here's my reasoning. And Donna Beneviento Leonardo leads. But what does she lead? It's not the other 3. It's the dolls. She's a leader of dolls.
There you go. That's true.
Leader of Dolls. My favorite metal album. Asked and answered there. Scott? Murph? All right, Duncan. This is kind of a broader one. And I'm curious about your answer. Hey, Waypoint crew. First time, long time, and all that. I've been drawn out of my shell to email on this occasion. The unrelated. Duncan, the fifth Ninja Turtle. I think there's already a fifth Ninja Turtle. The seventh Ninja Turtle, let's say. Let's skip six.
It's like the Mortal Kombat movie, you know? You need a player, an audience surrogate.
Yeah, exactly.
Duncan the Turtle.
I'm the sort that watches horror movies to relax or go to sleep because I find their formulaic nature comforting and the space for riffing and referencing on genre conventions deeply rewarding. But for me, horror in games is a very different experience. Something about being put in the place of the protagonist dips into the primal soup at the bottom of my soul and electrifies it. It gives me access to thrills that hark back to how I felt about video games when I was a kid, which finally brings me to my question. When do you remember horror games first gripping you? Which game was it and how did it feel? My first memory of horror in games really taking hold of me was seeing my cousin play Silent Hill, probably far too young, at about 10 years old. There was some sort of skinned corpse tied to a chain link fence, horribly spotlit by a torch or a streetlight. My stomach turned, but I also felt butterflies and was drawn to that experience, drawn to experience more of this awful thrill. I think from that moment on, I was a horror fan, though I was unfortunate to grow up during the torture porn garbage horror years of the 2000s.
Same.
So it took a while for me to find my footing. And so I wondered, particularly for Patrick, given his love of the genre, what those first experiences were like for y'all. Apologies for the long email. I'd love to hear your thoughts. P.S. Some very kind words about loving the site, etc., and reframing some political views and etc. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan.
Patrick, what was it? What was your early
Resident Evil
horror?
1? Like, funnily enough, is the formative first impression I can remember of like a horror game specifically. I didn't really get into horror as like a film. You know, I mean, I saw things because I was a young person and saw Alien and saw Hostel when I was in high school. Like just because, but like I'd actually become like a genre fan until college. Like AMC's used to air like marathon Halloween movies all through October, and I would just like put that on in college. And the movie Hellraiser was like my first like entry into that, like really like caring about like, oh, like these movies can be more than just like a cheap thrill sort of thing. And then when I met my wife, she had spent her whole life adoring horror films, and so that kind of set me on that path from films. But the first Resident Evil, which was like such a big deal when that came out on the PS1, and it's also why like there's a weird relationship with horror in that I don't like experiencing it by myself particularly. So it's strange when I'm like playing a Resident Evil Village by myself, and that I love being scared, but when I play a horror game strictly by myself, like in the dark, I do enjoy it, but I don't get the same enjoyment that I get like when I'm watching it with a movie with a friend or in a theater, like a packed, a theater, or streaming a game in which I still experience the thrill, but I like the little bit of safety that I get with having someone near you. It's why I was like, if something like ever happened to my wife, like I don't know that I would watch. I'd be all that interested in. I'd probably still be interested in the medium, but like being like scared out of my mind by myself on a couch, like I don't know that it was like nearly as appealing. And so even with Resident Evil 1, my primary memory of that is playing it with friends watching me backseat gaming. We would my house was right around the corner from the high school, and was also like the place that my friends would go even after middle school. Two of my best friends growing up, we all got off at the same stop, and my house was the closest from the middle school bus stop. And so I believe Resident Evil 1 came out when I want to say it was in was that 1996? I want to say
RE1?
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Either way, it was like,
that's correct.
Yeah. And so that means I was 11. That was either 8th grade, or I forget how the years split on that stuff, but I was pretty young, got that game, and they would come over and they would sit on my bed, and I would boot up Resident Evil, and I would remember so vividly the sequence of going down the hallway and the dogs bursting through the window and all of us screaming, like the first time that you try to exit through the front door of the mansion, and like it cuts to like the grimy CG cutscene of a dog trying to bite your hand, like revisiting that same hallway with the dogs and the fucking spiders being. I mean, like it was such a joy to play that game with an audience. Like it was like an early version of like streaming games in which there was like a performative aspect to it because I was the person playing the game in front of my friends. And so that's my first experience. And I did play Silent Hill, and you know, like I think back to I definitely played a decent number of horror games. It was like part of my repertoire, but it wasn't until much later that it became like an elevated genre in terms of my personal interest.
Yeah. I come to it in a weird way where obviously I'm not the horror fan that you are. But thinking about this question is really fascinating because it puts me in thoughts about my more general arc. Where now, like, there are lots of horror movies like I watch now, like when it makes sense to, when a bunch of friends are watching something, even by myself if I think something's going to be really good. Whereas when I was young, when I was a kid, like, you know, under 10, I was so terrified of it to the degree of like horror movie paraphernalia scared me. One of my babysitters, I had a babysitter named Raina, whose whole family was also sort of like an extended family to me. She and her brother Manny was only a few years older than me, and so Manny was like into video games and always had, like, Manny had a Neo Geo. You know what I mean?
Damn.
It was one of those situations, right? Had a Sega CD before anybody else I knew. You know, like that was.
Did you have the
thing.
adapter
like,
so you could put the arcade carts into the Neo Geo because they were the same hardware?
I don't remember.
Probably
I was so
not.
young. Do you know what I mean? Right.
Right.
And that was like my, you know, up until I was old enough to just stay home when my mom went to work or whatever, or, you know, when my dad wasn't around to pick me up or whatever. And like Manny had a Freddy Krueger glove, and just seeing it terrified me. I had an uncle and an aunt, Ralph and Elaine, who loved horror movies. And I remember once I was staying over their house for like 3 days, and I was so afraid they would make me watch a horror movie with them because I was so terrified. And of course, the thing that happens here is I was just reading an interview with Phil Elverum of Mount Erie and the Microphones, in which he talks about how when he first read about black metal, he imagined the music as being like hell incarnate because he never heard it before.
Right.
He was a music nerd from the Pacific Northwest, and he'd heard like metal before, but not black metal, not this image of like, especially if you read about the history of black metal and the violence that gets done and some of its connections to white supremacy.
There's a difference between
terrifying.
like Metallica and Megadeth and
and then like Burzum, right? Or like you read about like the history of this Norwegian black metal scene, and like, oh my god, when I hear this, it's gonna fuck me up. And then he heard it, he was like, this? They're kind of whining. And that ended up being my experience with horror, where I ended up stumbling into seeing, my way into horror film ended up being sci-fi horror, right?
Sure.
So like Alien, obviously. And Alien 3. In fact, in the video game world, the Alien 3 Genesis game.
Sure,
There's a lot of
great
games
game.
that were not horror games, but did play on horror visuals and stuff. Parasite
love the AVP
is another one.
beat 'em up that Capcom.
That beat 'em up is
did.
incredible. That beat 'em up is great. But the Alien 3 game on Genesis, there are lots of games that play on that atmosphere. And Alien 3 actually is maybe an early, is that like a precursor to the survival horror game? Because there's lots of like ammo stuff, and you're trying to rescue people, and you're whatever. Anyway, that the Friday the 13th NES game, which is, I guess, explicitly horror. But things like Slaughterhouse, also, like, I had some of that stuff. But then like seeing, when I was like 12, I saw Event Horizon, and like going from nothing to Event Horizon was like, oh, I can handle this. This isn't. That was scary as shit. I was scared the whole time, and I probably had nightmares, but it was fine, and it was interesting. And at that point, I was able to then, I mean, I think even before I saw Event Horizon, Resident Evil was just such a big splash that I played that. But then after seeing Event Horizon, I specifically remember feeling different about horror to the degree that I finally played more of Silent Hill. My friend, I want to say Michael, what was his name? I don't remember his name. Someone who lived near me at the time had lent me his copy of Silent Hill. And he was like, Austin, if you like Resident Evil, you have to play this. This is so much better than Resident Evil. And I played it the first time he gave it to me, he loaned it to me. I was like, oh, yeah, sure, totally. I love Resident Evil. And I played it, and I was like, I got like, 7 minutes in, I was like, I can't play this video game. It's too much for me.
Yeah,
but then after seeing Event Horizon and being like, I can withstand horror as a 12-year-old who thought he knew the world. I finally was able to like go back and play that game, and was like, this is sick. This is really good. And then the thing that I think the other half of it is learning that horror can be campy.
Right.
And that especially came out as I got older in high school, and then especially in college when I had a friend named Anthony who just like took me down the road of horror movies and like showed me a bunch of shit that I had not seen.
When I discovered
before.
Sam Raimi, like I
100%. That's exactly Sam
growing
Raimi.
up.
Yeah,
it's interesting to look back where like there were two things. There was like I had I loved the X-Files. It was my favorite show growing up, which really is Monster of the Week horror and thriller and sci-fi horror. And so even though I tell myself like, oh, I didn't really love horror until I saw things like Hellraiser and I got older, like, well, but you also spent the entirety of your youth obsessed with the X-Files and extraterrestrials and aliens. And a lot of that is playing in that same space. Yeah. And then it was around that same
you could
time.
Find these things that are like, they're in that space, but they also are, this is again, for me, it was science fiction horror where like, Alien is terrifying, but there's a spaceship. Event Horizon is terrifying, but there's a spaceship.
Yep.
Follow
it's not like down the street. Your house hasn't been invaded.
Exactly.
Which it's not Freddy invading your dreams.
Right. Exactly. I have dreams. I don't want Freddy in those dreams. I have to, one of my earliest road trips was me, my dad, my grandmother, my uncle, and I want to say my dad's fiance at the time, but maybe it was somebody. We were just packed in this fucking car going to South Carolina to visit my uncle. And that road trip through like the South, right? And that's not even deep South necessarily, was scary to me because it was the first time my dad had to have a conversation with me about like why we can't just go anywhere necessarily. And also shout out to my dad who might be listening to this just because he listens to all the podcasts. Was also the first time my dad just ignored, and maybe the only time my dad just fervently ignored rules of the road to just drive up on a hill to get around a huge traffic jam at one point. He was like, I don't want to be here. It's the middle of the night. We're already running 3 hours late. And just drove up. Anyway, so because of that sort of stuff and just general fears of small towns and rural America, like stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre was just like I could not do it at the time. I think probably until like the Rob Zombie flicks took that style of story and pumped it to 1,000 to where it becomes almost humorous again because
a lot of Rob Zombie stuff is high class camp or trying to. I don't
love those movies necessarily, but anyway,
they're very stylish, but
But like finding that through line is what did it for me, and I think that helped a lot. Also, just bad FMV horror games. Watching Vinny play through, and this was years later, obviously, but play through like Phantasmagoria with some of the giant bomb people.
Yeah, I played a lot of that stuff.
That stuff it's so bad, but so interesting. So horror is an interesting genre. I'm gonna skip this one.
Yep.
I do think this is funny. Someone wrote in to be like, isn't it strange how the reveal that Mia was a secret agent of a bioterror organization was completely forgotten about in Village?
Yep.
Yeah, it was weird. You're right. 100%. What do you think about this one from Jan here?
Sure. Hi, Waypoint. Mechanical question here. How do you feel about the game's inventory system? Unlike the other recent games, keys, crafting items, and treasures no longer occupy inventory space, meaning you barely ever have to do any inventory management. Personally, I think it's a change for the worse. Having to purposely leave items on the ground because you couldn't fit them in your bag meant you had to begin planning routes, analyzing the map, thinking ahead of time about what key items you'll need. I never had to do that in Resident Evil Village, which felt like a bummer. Still a good game, though. R.I. fucking P to Ethan's hands. Lots of love. Jan. I'm
of two minds on this. All right,
I don't have that much love.
You don't love it. You don't love being like, how do I fit this?
No, like
this rocket ammo or this key.
It feels like a relic that I'm nostalgic for in the sense that like it was interesting, but I don't know that I need it in my games anymore. Like I'd rather they find those tension points elsewhere than in that.
Ammo specifically, there were still moments where I was low on ammo, and they showed that they could do that.
And low enough that I was like switching to different weapons that was not the weapon I wanted to use.
Anytime I used a shotgun shell where I would have preferred to use 3 pistol bullets is a good moment in that game. Because I go like, and it does, but it works. And so I think that part they kept. The thing that this person doesn't mention that I felt bummed about was there's no crate. Because there's no real inventory crunch. I mean, as long as you buy the inventory upgrades, there's no crunch. That's the thing, right? You don't run out of inventory space if you buy a couple of those inventory upgrades that show up.
Right.
But I guess if you don't, then you have to juggle things a little bit, probably.
There was one time that I was told it won't fit, and I just like
I just have to moved
a thing of space, and it was like, now it fits.
Now
seems silly. That's one of those things where it's like, this feels like if you're gonna do it, then do it.
Just do
otherwise,
it at that point. Yeah.
toss it out, because I don't know that it's a value add. And if anything, it ends up being a subtraction in the way that Jan responded to it, of like, like, what are we even doing here?
Yeah. I guess it encouraged me to sell my old guns instead of put them in my chest and just like let them collect dust.
Yeah.
It's probably a change for the better in terms of what the overall design of this game is. I think the second that you're not managing keys and herbs and stuff, it becomes such a different game. And I guess that part of the thing there, I guess, as a game designer, when I think about pacing something, them knowing that you will have access to X green herbs and chem fluid at all times because you've gotten through that section and you didn't go put them in a chest somewhere, lets them know how to balance combat encounters, so they know you have a minimum number or an estimated number.
Also, the crafting system is
items.
your box.
Yeah.
Like they just repurpose it as a crafting system.
Yeah.
Because
but
the things
you have it all the time.
Right. The things you would be putting in the box are the things you can craft. It's like, oh, I need more shotgun bullets. Oh, I need an extra health thing. And it's like, you can make 5 health things at any time.
Point.
And those would just be the first aid sprays that you've dumped into your.
I also just love that when RE4 happened and the first aid spray joke really spread, of like, this guy just got hit with a chainsaw or whatever, and now he's gonna spray some stuff on him to heal up, has now turned all the way into it's a bottle of liquid and you pour it on yourself to reattach your hand.
Sure.
Why not? All right. Emil writes in and says, so I was reading this excellent piece by Kazuma Hashimoto over at Polygon. Kazuma Hashimoto, by the way, a great writer and a really good Twitter follow. You should do a search. I'm trying to remember there we go. It's Justice Kazi, 2 Z's and then an underscore. He's a translator. He's like a game translator, / Resident Evil liker over on Twitter. I was reading this piece by Kazuma over at Polygon about how the real horror of the Resident Evil series is about eugenics and state / corporate financed human experimentation. Do you think there's room in the Resident Evil series to treat these subjects with the weight and seriousness they deserve and put them more on the forefront of the game, or is the goofiness and the stupid things that happen to the protagonist and their crew integral to making these games work? Like, could the games do more to highlight that this, as there are a hell of a lot of fans who seemingly don't understand that? For example, Wesker is a neo-Nazi and social Darwinist and so on. Thanks for the pod and all the good work y'all keep doing, Emil. I have 2 answers to this, and they're literally opposite answers.
Right. Please.
One is, I don't trust this team to take these issues more seriously or more directly. The second is, and I am not the horror fan that you are, but horror often works in the realm of metaphor and in the realm of adjacency and tangentiality, in which what it wants to do is evoke, take a question and evoke an emotional response around it, take a desire or fear and illustrate or animate it in a way that is compelling and emotional. That's not to say that horror cannot delve into material, interesting concerns in a direct and thoughtful way. But when I think about the horror stuff that sticks with me, it often is playing with or is, exploring a topic emotionally more than in an intellectualized academic way.
Right.
Because to do that is to seek an answer instead of to confront the horror of not having the answer about something.
Well, it's
you know
why
what I mean?
I associate, part of the reason I like horror is I associate it with catharsis. Horror being like almost a purely emotional genre, like a lot of the, often, akin to like riding a roller coaster. Like, I like being scared, but like, I like doing that. I like exploring death. I like exploring how I feel about loss. I like exploring all those things through horror. And like, I don't need it to be, not that like horror can't be smart. Like, I certainly don't want to make like that. That is like, I hate.
But
that
even, but I don't want to go past that and say, even if when horror doesn't do this, it can be smart. It can be smart without being explicit in its political themes or something like that.
Yes, yeah. I don't need it to. Yeah, I think we're on the same page. And I think even like really what we would consider, like smart horror. I forget what the bullshit term that people elevated horror is. God, what people use for anything A24,
A24
releases,
horror.
Get Out,
Yes.
you know, which is basically like a smarty pants where it's got something to say. And it's like, I think that diminishes the power of other types of, and I think folks like Peele, who is born molded from the reason he can do the horror that he does is because he spent time with what would otherwise be considered, or characterized as lesser horror. But like that stuff just working often on a more guttural level. Like I think Get Out and Us are examples of like, those are not like, I don't consider those like necessarily like academic explorations of their subject, but it is operating on a different level. It is working with theme and in a way that is not necessarily as like base as like a lot of horror. But that's often what I'm looking for out of horror is like, I want to explore like those base emotions, experience catharsis, and work through like my reactions to those emotions.
And it's difficult, to be clear. It's difficult to, sorry, but I don't mean that it's, I mean, I do think it's difficult to make horror, but what I will say is one particular danger is to delve into something in a way that makes it very hard for people to know, one, if you're delving into it in a way that's genuine and thoughtful, two, in a way that is approachable by a lot of people. I'm reading the Berserk manga now, finally, because Miura, who was the author and the artist behind it, just died. And that's a seinen, like, young man's, manga about, a bunch of mercenaries and monsters, highly influential series like Dark Souls, Dragon's Dogma takes a lot from it, etc. It's really good, but it's also a series that delves into horror with all of the velocity of schlocky horror films that are willing to use like sexual violence as a cudgel. It also is on top of that being true, it is also a series about trauma, surviving trauma. It gives its main characters a lot of room to explore the traumas, the terrible traumas that they've faced. I don't want to like dismiss that part of it necessarily, nor do I want to hand wave that. I think the inclusion of that stuff makes it very hard for people to get into in a way that's completely understandable. But I also think that it comes from a desire to engage with questions of fear and desire, sexual and otherwise, questions of power. I mean, also, this is a 30-year-old manga at this point, so the mores have changed and et cetera. But, and I don't know that
horror is often, I feel like the best genre to reflect the advancement of culture.
Oh, 100%, right?
Like I've heard like a really fascinating, I've often bristled at like the rape revenge horror, which is like a very those have been around for a long time, and I bristle at those, but I've also read like very fascinating like feminist analysis of like the arc of that as a genre and how it reflects the sexuality of like norms of a culture in a way that's like, it doesn't necessarily like make you want to watch that movie, but it's stuff like that. Like there is worth. Yeah, I just think horror is a very interesting way of holding up a mirror to culture. Even if the film itself is not doing it, it reflects what people are thinking about and are anxious about.
I want the space for that story to be told, while I also desperately want to be clear that I don't think that it should be anyone's responsibility to expose themselves to those stories.
No, God, no.
Or that all of them do it well in any way. Absolutely. I do think that there is schlocky and exploitative work that uses, sexual assault and even different types of violence.
Yes.
And even racialized violence, right? Like Get Out should not have served as an open invitation for especially white directors to start, coming in and being like, we can show more black pain. We can show that this is an effective model for storytelling or something, or for horror. Like that alone doesn't do it for me. And so like, I think that there is a space here for horror to delve into difficult topics, including things like eugenics. And in many ways, Resident Evil is already doing that. But I don't know that, again, I don't trust this specific team to do it explicitly. And two, in relation to that, I think that an implicit and kind of thematic or metaphorical exploration of those anxieties can be just as potent in this format, at least, in terms of being able to delve in on that stuff. So thank you, Emil, for the very thoughtful question. I really appreciate that. speaking of horror things doing fucked up shit, first time, long time here, unsigned. I'm sure you're going to talk about this anyway, but do you think that the Duke as a character surpasses his god-awful design with his personality and the fact that he's basically your only friend in the game and seems to genuinely want you to succeed? It also helps that his role in the game makes you relieved and happy to see him whenever you do. Thanks for reading. I again saw people saying shit like, you know, I was really upset by the fatphobic design of the Duke at first, but by the end of the game, he was one of my favorite characters. And to that I say, was he a character? Tell me anything you know about the Duke.
The most interesting thing that the Duke says is probably his final line. Or no, the line before that. There's like the final sequence where Ethan is in his carriage.
Yeah.
And Ethan says, "Who are you?"
Yep.
And he says, "Well, not even I can really answer that question." Which one was like, I really like that line. But two, that's like the most you ever get into like, what is the Duke?
It's so frustrating to me, dude, to be like it's a very funny question. It's a very funny answer.
If you want to just argue that like the voice actor did a good job creating it, like a personality,
yes,
they did. Like
absolutely,
the voice acting does an incredible amount of work, I think, and is the only thing that gets you to the place that people are talking about. Because I don't
think to have that character and to not even get a single document, as far as I've seen, about him in any way means that he only gets to stand as the visual gag. Like, there is, yes, you feel comforted when you see him. It felt good to hear his elevator show up in the workshop, in the factory level.
Oh, the first, when you open the shutter and you realize you've just opened the other side, and it's like, yes.
Awesome, cool. When he comes up to your level, like, again, very cool, because it feels like a safe place. But there's not, as far as I've seen, you just don't get anything about who he is. And maybe that'll come out in DLC or something, but there's no characterization beyond his fatness, the groans he makes when you are in his menus, his love of food, down to the fact that he's surrounded by large sausages and breads and stuff in the thing. He's just a big walking fat joke, and it sucks because they just don't do anything with it outside of he's your big walking fat joke, you know?
And it's not even hidden in, like there are other like deeply like, you know, problematic characters in Resident Evil and how they treat, you know, even Moreau, you know, himself is dealing with a lot of like, but
they at least talk about Moreau's anxiety around it, which isn't necessarily well done necessarily. No, but he at least gets some history. Right.
And even that is like in some ways explicitly sort of like non-human, right? Like there's like distance here, whereas this is just like, it's just this really big dude. And I'm not going to get happy. I'm not going to get excited about jolly fat guy. Like, he ain't the first jolly fat guy. This is a well-established trope, right? I don't know. It is what it is. And you know, I don't know how often I've said this lately, or rather, I've said this a lot lately. I think one of the big differences about me being 35 going on 36, and maybe some of our younger listeners, is I grew up surrounded by this shit. Like, there's no escape of like the fat joke character, shows and movies filled with racism and homophobia. It was everywhere. And like, learning to navigate the world for me was learning to sit with that, right? As someone with depression, and anxiety, how many stories are about crazy people that I had to like watch that shit or read that shit and feel like I was like broken as a human because my brain didn't work the way other people's brains worked, or the way I felt that other people's brains were working. And I think that process, I happened to develop a hard skin to a lot of it. That does not mean that should be the way the world is. You shouldn't have to do that necessarily, but I did. And in many ways, I'm grateful that I did, because it lets me play a game like this and I'm not forced out of, I'm uncomfortable or I'm frustrated, but I'm able to play through past something like the Duke. Do you know what I mean? I'm not like seeing the Duke and going like, well, I have to turn this game off now because it's too uncomfortable for me. So I'm glad I've developed that thick skin. But I also am not going to pretend that shit isn't bad. It's just that it's everywhere. Like, there just isn't a pure work for me. And growing up, I certainly couldn't go on itch and find games made by people who looked and sounded and like lived the way I did, or the way my mind worked. It just wasn't available to me. And so I think part of that was developing
techniques to navigate stuff like that, or techniques to bracket my uncomfortable feelings about someone like the Duke and being able to enjoy the game.
And the game gives you no way to compartmentalize it either, right? Like at least with, even like, like a character like Moreau, like something has happened to him out of his control. Like he was, changed by something like the mold, like whatever, problematic, history that like the artist may be pulling on in their depictions, like the character itself, like who you are seeing are people, something terrible has been done to them. And I'm not trying to draw an analogy that like being fat, that something wrong has been done to these people. Totally. What I'm just saying is you're not given anything with, that's where any sort of characterization, maybe it wouldn't have necessarily like left you feeling like this is great. I'm glad this is, but there would have been
the lack of
something.
Investment means something, right? Like that's I think about a lot in terms of the history of game, or a way of analyzing games, especially games, as any game, is where were the resources put? What was prioritized? And a good example of this is looking at like a game like Life is Strange that has 2 endings. One of them is really expansive with a musical number, and like there's all sorts of like, all sorts of finality associated with it. And there's another ending that's over in the blink of an eye, and it wraps up very quickly, and you don't have that big sense of invested resolution because it doesn't get the big multi-minute thing. You see this in visual novels a lot, where like some routes get unique art, they get unique music, they get big plot beats, and other ones don't. Other ones, you're just getting the same, established art and then like a few lines of text. And I'm not saying that everything needs 100%. You're allowed to, as an artist, make decisions about what you want to prioritize, obviously. But when it happens like this, where it's like, well, the fat character, he could just say he's a mystery at the end and we're good, no big deal, is telling about where that prioritization happened. That someone made decisions about where that went and what needed to get finished or needed to be included or needed to get told and what didn't. And I think that that's a very useful way to look at works. And yes, often, especially in something as complicated as video games, that prioritization is not clean because it reflects a failure in a system along the way, or a process. Some stuff just doesn't get finished sometimes. But I do really truly believe that, like, if 2 years ago someone said, well, if we're going to include this character, he's got to have an interesting story, he's got to have some characterization beyond just being a jolly dude who you don't trust at first and come to trust because he's always at your save point, that would get in the game.
And also you're going to hunt food for him, and he's going to make noises while, you know what I mean? Like,
he's going to joke about how, yes, you can have some of the food he made, right? So yeah, that's it. A few more here. This one I'm just going to summarize. This one's from Pippin, who basically says, I only got into the Resident Evil games with the Resident Evil 2 remake. Currently is playing 7. Hey, should I go back and play these games? Are the original ones really good? They had tried 4 and the first remake in the past, but they never really clicked with them. And now, with the RE4 remake, should I just wait for that? Or should I go back, and are those early games worth playing?
At this point, Capcom seems interested in like revisiting the franchise, and I think that will at some point include actually just revisiting Resident Evil 1. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they went and actually, I think they did a hell of a job with that remake from 15 years ago. I think that it does a really good job of straddling the line of updating that, making it feel fresh and modern while keeping a lot of the bones of that original game. But that's hard to go back to. I think RE2 is absolutely worth playing. At this point, I would wait for Resident Evil 4. I mean, like it seems like they're going through the canon. Like, I'll be fascinated to see if they feel compelled to have to essentially redo Code Veronica from scratch, because a lot of that game just doesn't work. And you wouldn't be able to just remake. But I don't know. I think you would have a really hard time playing a lot of those older games. And at the pace that Capcom is now making these games, which is 1 a year, swapping between an original game and a revisiting of the past, and they've since proven that I think they do a really good job. I think RE2 does not erase that original game. You can still get it if you wanted to go and play that after. But like, I think as someone that like played that game at the time, revisited it later, played the new one, I think it perfectly captures what was special about that and makes it playable and approachable in a modern context. And at this point, I would just kind of like RE4 is hard to play. Like it's like so painful to say. It's, you know, like as a game that's for a lot of people considered one of, you know, the GOATs. But like I looked at that, like the upcoming Oculus edition, which uses a lot of the same assets, same structure. I'm interested to play that version of the game because it's like it's just a different approach. But man, it's hard to fucking look at. Like it truly is, and you can't help but look at that and go, God, if they could do what they did to RE2 to RE4, like that would just be. I'd be happy to play that again. So my advice is to wait.
Do you think we're like 3 years off from you again being able to look at it and be like, yeah, this looks not good, but I think a thing that happens with a lot of folks in games is sometimes something is old enough that it looks bad, but new enough that it looks bad. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That like at this point, PS1 games don't look bad to me. They look like PS1 games. Yeah. And at some point, presumably, will RE4 look like that? Like, yeah, it just looks like a game from that era, not bad.
Well, I guess I guess it's a question of like, what does this person want? Do you want to have in some like closer to what was it like for me, for you, for a lot of people to play Resident Evil 4 for the first time? Then you should wait for the new one. If you just want to have like a broader sense of the arc of this series, then like go into that game knowing that like that's what you're there for. Because
I don't know that they'll get what we got from that series at the time necessarily with a remake, but I also don't think they'll get it from the original. I think that like what we had from RE4 at the time is just they got it from the RE2 remake. They got something like it from a different game. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is what it is. Like I think that we should give up on the hope of recapturing what someone originally would have felt because our contexts are just so different. Yeah. Like RE4, we know this, right? RE4 is one of those games that helped inspire like Gears of War, which then led to a billion cover-based shooters. Right. Right. And so like if you've played the Last of Us series, then going to play RE4 is never going to feel like the way we did. Which is
a part of the problem for The Evil Within. When Shinji Mikami, was the creative director of a lot of Resident Evil games, like, was one of the chief designers, which I think creative director on RE4, and is credited with a lot of like the really like groundbreaking ideas that was introduced in that sequel. And then he decided to come back and do another one of those with Evil Within. And like what you saw was a game that was in conversation with itself as opposed to the games that it had influenced as a result. Right. And that was a really tough game to play as a result. And so like that's I think that, in a very real way with like the chief architect of RE4 like illustrates exactly what you're saying of like there's just no, there's no way to feel it the way that the people felt it when it came out because the context just changes the moment it's released and everything else reacts to it.
Totally. Dan writes in and says, despite a number of players and critics excitedly warning people of how scary the Beneviento house was, I wasn't too spooked by it. One of the reasons was why is when I had my guns taken away from me, all of the built-up suspense after entering the house and going down to the basement dissipated. I think knowing that I didn't have to defend myself from whatever might be lurking below, and the game limiting my options for survival to run away greatly decreased the intensity of the situation. I knew exactly what to do at every moment, and with the basement being so small, it was easy to navigate without getting lost. What were your feelings while playing this section? P.S. That baby was adorable. I was laughing when I saw that big old baby. Was not scared one bit. I wanted to give it a hug. Regards, Dan. And follow up quickly, Ryan from Florida. What's up? Did y'all get swallowed by that fucking baby, though?
Yeah, I did.
It's just wild. Love the pod. Take care. I did not get swallowed by the baby.
You should look it up. Can you look it up right now? I'll answer this question while you look up this video.
You start answering this question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think probably that section definitely suffered from a bit, which often happens in horror, like this thing is the scariest thing you have ever seen. And that sets expectations in a way. Like part of what makes that section work, I think, is the surprise of it. Is that I did not expect there were to be anything like that in the game. And so then coming across it completely took me by surprise, which then lowered my guard in a way that I was not anticipating. Which is why
this baby is wild.
Yeah, are you getting swallowed?
I'm getting swallowed. This is like the opposite of that bit in. Actually, it's the same as that bit in Death Stranding. Remember that Death Stranding trailer?
Yes.
Where it zooms in the throat. Yeah, that's the whole thing. I mean, this is a great this is a great illustration of the thing that I was saying before about how horror works in the realm of metaphor, right? Which is like, this whole game is Ethan trying to find his baby. And also, when he sees a big baby, when in his hallucinogenic state, what he imagines is going to come and kill him is a big baby.
Right.
And that he's going to get swallowed by, there's a lot to unpack there. I will not do my armchair psychoanalysis, but there's a lot to work through there. And that is part of what makes horror so great, is you could tell a story about a dad trying to save his baby, and then the scariest thing in it is a big baby monster. I was scared by that section. I just had a conversation a couple of days ago with Ash over at Kotaku, or not a conversation, but we tweeted back and forth the equivalent of being like, like that style of thing, which basically, like, the thing that I'll say that I did a bunch in that section was every time I went in that room for a second that had the typewriter in it, I was like, I just gotta make a new save. Yep. Every time I got a key, I was like, I gotta make a new save. Sorry, I just got it real quick. Let me just quickly, I took one piece off the mannequin. Let me just do a quick save just in case. You know what I mean? And that make that section was great, I think, because of my fear there, even though it's kind of like this, person says, like, the second you lose your guns, you're not going to get into a gunfight. But that still made me uncomfortable. I didn't feel safe.
One of my one of the things that I was scared of the most growing up was in order to get my parents had a fridge in the garage, and that's where, like, junk like soda and like long-term storage of different like cold things went. But that's where the soda went. And so you wanted to get one of those, you had to go out there, and to get there, you had to go down I had to go down, down the stairs from the kitchen, across the living room. And I distinctly remember turning left, and it was a dark hallway to get there, to get to the door to the garage. And later in life, my parents put on this extra room in the back, and the lights were always off in that room and in that hallway, because they were only on if my dad was home. My dad was a salesperson, and was always on the road, just constantly gone. And so if he wasn't home, those lights were off. And you wanted to go get that soda, you needed to go down that hallway. And my mom was always mad if you left the light on, which meant that you could turn the light on to get there. And then you'd grab the soda, come out, and then and where the switch was, you couldn't do it at the bottom. Like, you had to do it on your way out, which meant I had this long, dark hallway behind me. And I always had the sense that there was something following me. And so I would, the amount of times I like nearly fucked up my ankle jumping down the stairs so I could just like scoot my ass out of there. And so I've always had a thing where when I have something behind me chasing me, like, that just gets me so bad. Like, even like 36, like, I'll have moments like that in, walking around, doing whatever. And so that sequence is just like, I got this thing chasing me and I can hear it. And
I know it's there.
And not even like the baby, I got 2 kids and I have a baby. None of that like it was just weird. Like that didn't like have like a psychic effect on me, but just the idea of like bait this thing, run, and then, like go put in the piece into the elevator,
the elevator stuff.
And then when that thing starts chasing you as the elevator door is opening. Fuck.
It's good. It's a good section. It's a great section. I'm glad they put that in there. Speaking of good sections, this one from Chris, I'm just going to summarize again. Longtime fan of Resident Evil series, and it got them thinking about old horror games that they love and missed. While finally playing the Silent Hill series, a friend of mine started naming his favorite rooms in the series, like the butterfly room in Silent Hill 2's apartments. Question: do either of y'all have any single rooms you love in horror games? What do you think makes for a compelling confined space in one of these? Much love, and thank you for making my commutes better for years now. Thank you, Chris. Is there any specific room that comes to mind that you love from horror games? I had an advantage because I looked at this, and then I have a disadvantage because I had to read all those other questions, and now I've forgotten what my answer was going to be.
Yeah.
I really love the holes in Silent Hill 2 where you jump down the hole in the historical society.
Sure.
And it becomes a prison. You're just like, there's a hole here. Do I jump in it? And you go, yeah. And then it changes where you're at, basically.
Village has a good... there's a sequence where...
where is that?
you go down a well.
That well sequence is great.
And actually, in the Benvenuto house, like there is a sequence where you like go down the stairs, and there's also a well that you go down. Like there's a couple times
that moment where you're like, is it twice? Do you just climb down the well? And there's a moment when the thing you pull up out of a well is like a staircase or not a staircase, a ladder, and you're like, fuck you. That is a great moment when you realize that it's going to make you go down there.
That and like long, like, you know, whenever I think, you know, when I think of a horror game, I think of like the long hallway and long innocuous room, like long innocuous rooms, and then like that a lot of things fit into that, which can be like in Silent Hill, you know, or like in any horror game, which is like going down a dark stairwell and you don't know it's at the bottom, or going down the well in Village, or going down the long hallway in, you know, Resident Evil 1 before you know that the dogs are gonna. So like those things. So, like,
did you see that clip going around of someone playing RE1 for the first time and the dogs completely getting them? It's very good.
That's good.
And it's like, yep, still works. Those dogs will still get you.
Oh, that makes me happy.
God, what were I said that to the whole thing, but there was another classic. Oh, you know what I just remembered as in terms of talking about horror games? One of the earliest games that I played that scared the shit out of me was Doom. Playing Doom was incredibly scary to me because of the demons and the metal and just like the scare. It's not a horror game necessarily, but again, it's playing in that space. Also, it's just like fast and good, but yeah. Fuck, I feel like I had a really good answer for this, and now I've lost it, and that's a bummer. Oh well. That's how it goes sometimes. Only a couple more of these. We had a couple questions, and I'm just going to summarize again together. Ariana wrote in basically saying, hey, one of the big things in RE games is replayability, but do you think that having the map show you where all of the treasures and stuff are helps take away from that replayability? Because, like, you get all the collectibles, you get all the secrets, you get all the treasures. Like, not only do the rooms turn blue when they're clear, but like straight up there are treasure chests on the map that tell you there are treasures here. Do you think that takes away out of it? Or quote, is the series going for something closer to the Sony Prestige template? I guess presumably where you're like, you get through the game, you see all of the content, and you get to check all the boxes. I don't think it hits the Sony Prestige things. I think that's so much more about the way a story is told than about the way you collect stuff, because I think that you think about that template gets applied to open world action games like Ghost of Tsushima or Days Gone, but also to very linear games like the Uncharted series.
Also, I think actually our like Village finds a nice sweet spot, which is like you and I, lots of people are going to play it once and want to do as much as they can on that first playthrough. And so having that stuff marked was like really satisfying to be able to like go like pick and choose the things I wanted to do and not wanted to do, and to kind of like check
the actual
off.
Best room in the game, the final brazier puzzle.
Yes.
That we talked about the other day.
Yes.
Which is
very good.
Which is very funny.
But also like Capcom has layered on a whole set of meta challenges, right? That like, and you get hints of that when you beat the game, where it's like, hey, actually there was there are achievements and trophies, but then like sub challenges that you're using in order to, you know, get points that you can unlock for features for future playthroughs.
Like Kyle notes, like one of those, another letter we got basically was someone saying, I enjoyed lumping as many challenges together as possible for replays, like getting the speedrun trophy plus the knives only trophy, using less than 4 healing juices, and buying nothing from the merchant. This was an extremely rewarding experience on even the easiest difficulty. I'd recommend it if you're on the fence. All I have to do now is the mercenaries mode. So like, yeah, there are definitely people who are going through and doing all of those challenges. I haven't touched it.
And I would prefer like the balance there where it's like, I feel very satisfied. Like I did like, felt like 98% of what I wanted to do. And it's like, I didn't do the Benvenuto like sub boss. There were like 3 different rooms where I just, even looking at a map from like Polygon's guide, I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, that's fine. I'm good.
Oh,
like,
the worst one of those, two bad ones for me. One, there's just a house in the village that I just could not fucking find the last thing. I just could not find it, and I felt
there's like once or twice where you had to crouch, and it would be like underneath.
Yes,
and I was like,
and
the game doesn't ask you to do that often enough for you to even think that that's where you should be looking.
The worst one in the game, in my opinion, is the foundry inside the factory.
Okay.
Because the last thing you need is the ball for the labyrinth puzzle.
Right.
And you get... it doesn't clear until you... so again, for people who haven't played this game but are listening, there's a foundry, like a thing where you put like a mold in to then like mold something out of molten steel, basically. And it won't turn blue until you've done the last one of those. And how the fuck do I know that how would I have known that without looking up the guide that I'd done the last one of those, and there isn't just a secret thing under a shelf somewhere that I've missed.
Right.
But finally I found the last one. I looked it up and I was like, oh, there's one of these things. I wanted to finish those anyway, so it's fine. But yes, I this balance worked for me because I'm only going to play it once. I'm not the person who's going to go through and play these challenges. I don't have the time for it.
And people seem really happy
with
with the replayability of
That's
this
good.
one specifically. I know lots of people play these games over and over.
This has always been a thing with these games. Like when RE2 came out, I played through again to try to unlock Tofu and who was the other character in RE2?
Shit. Because Tofu's an actual walking tofu, and then there's
also the dude, right?
Oh damn! This is gonna bug me.
The problem is now you do a search for RE2 unlockables.
But I say unlockable mode, it's gotta be because that's been a persistent thing.
Here we go. The Tofu Survivor was a mini game in the original RE2.
There's another one though.
There is. I know. Who was it?
Shit. Unlockables in Resident Evil 1998.
Hunk.
Thank you.
Hunk.
Yes, that was it.
Yes,
that was it.
Hunk.
So I never did that because I
Yes.
think you had to beat the game so fast that I.
You just couldn't get through it that quick.
Or I just lost
One of
interest
them,
in doing that. And then eventually just like unlocked that stuff with a Game Shark so I could see what.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Actually just
totally.
move
But like,
move
I
the
loved all
tofu
that stuff
model
at the time. I loved all that, doing all that sort of stuff at the time. Now I just don't engage with it that way. 2 more questions, unsigned. You are walking one day across the village, and Mother Miranda jumps out of a bush with a shotgun, forces you to marry one of the lords.
Does she
You
need
can
a
pick
shotgun?
which one. Huh?
She needs a shotgun?
Yeah, she's a shotgun for this. Yeah. It is. Who do you choose and why?
So we're getting married.
Getting married. There's a big ceremony. It happens out by where the rose ceremony happens, except this time you get married instead of having to fight Mother Miranda.
I feel like it's like there's like the very convenient answer.
Lady Demontress.
Yeah, I feel like you have to take her off the table. I feel like she's taken. Like, of
the
course
thing
she
is,
is.
She has many quarters. So many people are trying to marry her.
Right. I don't know. Why would she choose you?
Right. Well, I think Donna Benevienta and I could have a lovely relationship. She makes dolls. I'm curious about, like, I love a person who has a hobby.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And they're really into this hobby.
Dolls.
And
She's
they'll be
really
okay
into that hobby.
if you're into your hobbies. They'll have to respect
I bet,
that.
you know what? Let me make a fucking Gundam with Donna. Donna can come over. I got all these Gundam kits. I bet she already has tools.
Then she'll give
Probably
you a
has
little
paints.
Mushroom juice, and you can watch them come to life.
We'll shroom up. Exactly. And do little fights.
You might be able to pilot a mech with her powers.
With her. Yeah, totally. Fuck it. Or just like have a chill time. Like, we don't have to go through all this. And also I think Ethan is not particularly interested in going through his own psyche and confronting his fears. I think he's very interested in running away from them and shooting them. But I think if I just let the evil mushroom juice into my brain and we get to like work through some shit, I'm sure I got some demons in there. I would, instead of being killed by the doll, I'd wake up and I'd be like, Donna, thank you for helping me get through this. I hadn't thought through my own anxieties in this way before. And I love you just the way you are, scars and all. I saw that painting of you that was really nice. Was that not your face? You got some stuff going on behind the veil? Okay, that's fine. I'm down. Listen, we'll get through this world together. You and me.
I see. I think I'm gonna.
And the dolls.
I'm gonna pick Moreau, and
Okay.
that's gonna take Miranda by surprise. Really, like
Moreau?
And I'm gonna roll. Moreau's like, look, we don't gotta. I don't know what you want. Like, I don't know what you need. I'm not saying we're gonna get married, but we're gonna get the fuck out of here, and you're gonna
You and
find
me, buddy.
happiness. You need me
in the world.
so why you can find what you need. And
This seems a little one-sided. This seems a little bit. You don't think he'd be offended by you being like, you don't want to really marry me? Now I'm going to turn into a big fish. I thought we were going to get married.
well, they're down. I don't, I'm choosing my shot. I don't trust Heisenberg. Like, I feel like,
absolutely not.
and you've already taken someone else. Lady D, again, it's off. I just don't think she's going to choose me. And so
what if you told him, okay, but what if you were like,
Miranda.
Put the gun down, Miranda.
Oh, that was my other thought, was just like, I grab her hand, like, why should I have to choose? My heart is already chosen.
By you. Forget about your 100-year-old dead baby. We make a new baby. You and me, Miranda. Let's
Cut to black.
Cut to black. That's right.
This father's story is not over.
Final question comes in from Unsigned. Good morning / afternoon, kind sir / madams. If Resident Evil, what is landlord? Eviler is what I will say.
Yeah.
Evilist.
Look at
Resident
Spencer.
Evil?
I guess Spencer is the landlord of the Resident Evil mythology.
Right, yeah, in many ways. Very evil.
Very bad.
Spencer is the dude who fell, or I guess, again, I'm maybe projecting, but met Miranda as a doctoral student. Like, he showed up and it was like in the snow and she resuscitated him and they got to talking about both loving evil bioweapons.
And that's part of what I love about
funny.
The absurdity of the mythology, and where, people, I think understandably asking, wouldn't it be easier just to start from scratch and use some of the and it's like, no, I fucking love that 8 main games in, 20, 30 spin-offs in, how many animated tie-in films, comics, all part of the canon. No, Village is the one where actually here's the origin story of Umbrella that you
rescued
didn't
by
know.
Miranda. Right. Yeah.
It's great.
Who at that point would have been what she was in that exit or the outro movie where she's like healing people in the church or whatever, right?
Right.
Which, by the way, that outro storybook movie, there's the storybook that also Miranda is reading that story at the beginning of the game 2 rows.
Yep.
The Book of Shadows or Village of Shadows story, whatever it is.
Yeah, very beautifully. Really, really
beautiful
cool.
animation. And that exits the outro song that plays is great, where it's like all the text of that story are sung by like a Bjork, like, I don't know who actually did that song because it's very good. Anyway, Landlord Eviler. Resident Evil. Landlord Eviler. Also, we should just say Resident Evil is such a good name for a series. We're so far past it now that it doesn't.
It's
like,
looped all the way around.
Biohazard, right? In Japan.
Yes.
It's still just called that?
I believe so. So what is Resident Evil?
Yeah, what's Village called?
Village Japan called?
Is it just called
Biohazard Village.
That's funny. Resident Evil is so good as a name.
I'm curious. Like, is Biohazard the equivalent nonsensical camp that Resident Evil is equivalent to?
But Biohazard at least has a real meaning.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
I don't know.
I'm sure there's a story, some sort of oral history that explains the origins of that name. I don't know it offhand.
I've always thought of it as a what do you call it? A callback to Sweet Home for some reason. The survival horror game for the Famicom.
Sure. That's like Shinji Mikami.
Which it isn't a callback to that, but in my mind, Sweet Home Resident Evil feels like there's a connection there about houses, because houses and horror.
I don't know if this is true. I'm pasting this from stackexchange.com, which just seems like
thank you, Stack Exchange.
Kiora riff.
No, you don't. Do you?
So from this random user, further insight, if you translate Resident Evil English to Japanese, you get Biohazard. Is that... Can you do it? Can you confirm this for us, Austin?
I'm going to do a Google search. I don't think that's true.
That can't be true, right?
Let's see here. There's just no way, right? I don't think so. I think that's someone who just went on like a Google Translate and typed it in, and Google Translate knows enough to be like, yeah, that's just...
Yeah, okay. So actually, here we go. Okay. Chris Kramer, longtime PR person in video games, told the story in 2009. There's a Kotaku article called "Why Was Biohazard Changed to Resident Evil?" Kramer says, in late 1994, Capcom Entertainment in the U.S. was starting to ramp up marketing plans for the game that would eventually become known as Resident Evil in the U.S. Capcom Japan had let us know the name of the game is going to be Biohazard in Japan. But I pointed out to the person who ran marketing at the time that it would be next to impossible for Capcom to register the name in the U.S. As an example, I pointed out that a crappy DOS-based game had just come out in the U.S. called Biohazard, not to mention the New York hardcore band of the same name, and that we'd never be able to secure the mark. As a result, the head of marketing held a company-wide contest to come up with a new name for the game. The winner of the competition, this is Luke Plunkett writing at Kotaku, the winner of the competition was, of course, Resident Evil, being a pun on the fact that the first game was set in a mansion. For the record, Kramer voted against it, saying the name was, quote, super cheesy. Show me the list of all the names.
I want to see the list. Also, of note, when development began in 1993, Resident Evil was originally intended to be a remake of Sweet Home.
Right, yes, yeah.
So, okay, sure. Yeah, there we go. I didn't realize that. Cool. All right. On that note, on the note of Landlord Eviler, we should wrap this up. As always, you can follow us twitter.com/waypoint, waypoint.vice.com, waypoint.zone/subscribe is the URL to go support us if you've enjoyed this, if you'd like to hear more. Additionally, there's like some other benefits that are all up on that site. We're recording this before it launches, so I don't want to like say stuff that's not up there yet. You should also note now twitch.tv/waypoint to come watch us do some streams these days.
Yeah,
which is exciting for that to be back. So if you're listening to this because you wanted to hear us talk about this and didn't realize we were streaming again, well, we are. A few times a month, basically. Twitch.tv/waypoint. Also, we're going to have a bunch of coverage as we go into E3 week. Rob and Patrick are coming to New York.
That's
We're going
true.
to be on a set together.
Woo.
We're going to be hanging out. So look forward to that.
What are we going to do? Not sure. Depends on what E3 is.
Yeah,
or isn't.
Play Resident Evil 1. Who knows? You know what I mean? Maybe that's what'll be the most interesting. Who could fucking say? We'll see. Follow me, twitter.com/Austin_Walker. Where can people find you, Patrick?
At Patrick Klepek.
Cadeau isn't here, but shout outs to Cadeau. A_Cadeau_ appears. Also, every time the Cadeau showed up in this game, I was like, Cadeau. Also, Cadeau, apparently, again, according to Janine, who knows French, is French for gift, which is a very good way of naming your parasite. That's a good, I'm giving you a gift. Shoutouts to Bowen for letting us use the track Miss You off the EP Pale Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. We'll be back on Monday, I think, with more, because this will go up on a Friday probably.
Yeah.
If it doesn't go up on a Friday, guess what? We'll still be, I said Monday, Tuesday. We'll be back for a regular Tuesday show. Look forward to that. Until then, Resident Evil, Landlord Eviler, fuck capitalism, go Sweet Home. When I say it like that, it sounds like a sports team. Go Sweet Home.
There's not a lot of insight of the sports universe of Resident Evil. Are there sports names? Is that written in a wiki somewhere?
Is there a Raccoon City sports team?
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let's close the book on
there
this.
There has to be.
Raccoons.
The Raccoon Sharks.
Really?
Are Raccoon City's local American football team. A riot occurred on the night of September 24th during one of their games. The riot was due to a T-viral outbreak. A single zombie rampaged across the stadium, turning it into a bloodbath, ending with several people being sent to Raccoon General Hospital in critical condition.
Read the bit below this, because you must be reading the same fandom wiki.
In the English version of the Outbreak opening, the name of their competing team is given as the Old Court Thunders, though this is not present in the original script. Thank you. That's very good. All right, bye.
Bye.